I just confirm, Mac or Anne, that we'll be recording, and all members are aware that the meeting will be recorded and published in the usual way for our area committees.
Yes, Chair, the meeting's been recorded.
Thank you very much, Anne. Okay, members, we'll be covering the agenda as published to all members and is also available on the Highland Council website. I will be taking interim chair of the meeting whilst Councillor Ron Gunn is unavailable. I'd just like to wish him and his family well at this time. Before we move on to the agenda as listed, I do want to congratulate High Ormley Hotspurs for winning the 2022 Highland Amateur Cup. It's a fantastic achievement, and it's a great good news story to start our Caithness committee here, albeit digitally in the far north. I'll move on then, members, to item number 1, and that is apologies for absence.
Chair, do you want me to do a roll call?
Yeah, absolutely, Anne. No, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Bremner?
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Jarvie? Councillor Mackay?
Here.
Councillor Mackey? Here. Councillor McEwen?
Here.
Councillor Rees?
Yes, I'm here. Unfortunately, Chair, I'm having to join on my phone because I can't get a connection from my laptop, but I'll keep trying.
And Councillor Rosie.
Present. Good morning, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. And Mac, I'm correct in saying that Councillor Gunn has put in his apologies, hence why I'm in the chair, so we'll get that noted in a minute.
He has, yes.
Thank you very much. We'll then move on, members, to declaration of interest. As always, members are asked to consider whether they have an interest to declare in relation to any item on today's agenda, and any member making such a declaration of interest should provide some information on the nature of the interest and leave the meeting at appropriate time if that is the case. So members, I'll look for any declarations of interest, and as always, if you can raise your digital hand in the usual way if that is the case. No, I'll take silence as being nothing to report. Okay then, members, we'll move on to agenda item number 3, and that is the minutes. There has been circulated for noting the minutes of the Caithness Committee held on the 9th of February 2022, which were approved by the Council on 10th March 2022. Do we have any, I suppose, for noting, so is there anything else that members want to outline, any concerns, or are we content that that is a reflection of the minute? Matthew, I've seen you flickering on my screen. Was that an attempt to come in?
No, I'm content. Thank you.
No worries. Okay then, members, if we are content, then we will note that minute as it has been presented in your papers. We'll then move on to agenda item number 4, and that is matters arising, and that is our action tracker. For those who'll be quite familiar with Caithness Committee procedure, i.e. some of the members who were here prior to the election back in May, this was an item that had started to come up on a regular basis here at Caithness Area Committee. For the last number of meetings, it has not been present, and I'm conscious that there is no paper or there is no action tracker to actually discuss today, albeit the council leader has been very helpful in providing the most recent version to both myself and the ward manager. With that being said, what I'd just like to I'll hand over to Councillor Bremner, if that's okay, just to outline the current position, and he also has an outline proposal for how we will deal with this item going forward. So, Councillor Leader.
Thank you very much, Struan, and please pass our wishes to Ron and his family, and well done you for stepping into the chair on an interim basis. Yes, thanks very much. Just as a matter of interest for new members, I have sent the current proposed action tracker to the chair in its new format. I think, and I have suggested to the chair and to the meeting here that there are a number of things that maybe what we can do for noting here is the first one is to agree for the action tracker to be actually distributed, and for that for a meeting to take place possibly Monday the 29th of September at 9:30 to review that action tracker in its new format after it's sent out to the members. That would give members the opportunity to be briefed on the project backgrounds from other returning members who were involved in some of those projects. The members could then decide whether they wish to continue with the meeting and agree the dates on which they convene. They used to be monthly, a fortnight after the area business meeting, and therefore that first meeting would then, after next Monday, would take place on Monday the 19th of September and monthly thereafter. Those dates could then be arranged and diarised in members' calendars, but that we can take the opportunity to acknowledge the action at the previous meeting, state that a revised format has been sent after today's meeting, and invite members to review or familiarise themselves, and for members who are involved in those projects to seek updates, and gives them the chance to brief their colleagues for any suggested actions and how it may be reported back to the Caithness Area Committee if they so wish to continue with that format of meeting going forward. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Raymond. If it's possible, Raymond, can you forward that effectively the email that you just sent me, which you've outlined verbally, can you forward that to Anne? And I think Mac's already got a copy. And members, what I'm quite content to do is I'm going to take that as a proposal, effectively a motion on the matters arising, which is outlining how we'll be dealing with it going forward. And if Raymond's happy to propose that, I'll be happy to second. We'll ask any members, is there any alternative ways that you're wanting to deal with the action tracker? Because I'm conscious this is unique to the Caithness Area Committee, and it's because we feel that there's an awful lot of things that we're trying to tackle. And part of the way of presenting it to members of the public was to show that transparency, that some issues were being effectively addressed, being worked through, and even when there was no update of significance, we were still coming to the area committee and outlining that it was still a priority for the 8 members that we have here in Caithness. So I think that the council leader's proposal there is a really sensible way to take it forward, and unless there are any other members minded, I'd be looking for I suppose consent from the committee that we'll take that forward.
I'm happy to agree to that as a proposal. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, members. So that's agenda. Oh, thanks, Janet. So that's agenda item number 4 then, with the proposal as outlined from the council leader. We'll move on, members, to agenda item number 5 on your papers, and that is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Local Performance Report. I believe today we have both we've got Michael Humphreys, who's the Group Commander for Highland. We also have Paddy Farrell, who's the Station Commander. So, gentlemen, can you just outline who will be presenting the paper today?
Morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. That would be myself, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you very much, Paddy. Feel free to outline your paper and I suppose highlight any pertinent parts of it to members, and then I'll be opening it up to members of the committee to field any questions or queries.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, elected members. I'm here this morning to deliver the SFRS performance report to the committee for Q1 April to June 2022. If I could direct your attention, please, to section 3.2 of the report. With the relaxation of COVID restrictions, local crews in the Caithness area have been able to return to more in-person engagement with the local communities. Both Wick and Thurso crews have met the public at open days and community events, providing advice on fire and road safety. Local crews will also continue to deliver home fire safety visits, which we are now able to, with the relaxation of COVID restrictions, we are now able to offer to households who would be deemed from very high to low risk. And these activities are supported by our community safety advocates. During the reporting period, we have also concluded the first year of the local youth volunteer scheme, which is based in Wick, which includes local school-age children from both Thurso and Wick high schools. The year 2 of the programme is scheduled to begin this month. If I could direct your attention to 3.3 of the report, the performance report shows 6 incidents which occurred in Caithness, which have been recorded as accidental dwelling fires, fire fatalities, fire casualties, or deliberate fires. Analysis of these incidents showed that one incident occurred in a domestic setting with no accidental fire casualties or fatalities. There were also 5 deliberate fires which were attended in Caithness in the reporting period. 3 occurred in residential settings and are subject to Police Scotland investigation. 1 incident of rubbish alight and 1 incident of controlled burning. I should note that we did attend 1 dwelling fire in March of this year, although not in the reporting period, in the Wick area, which sadly resulted in the death of 1 adult male. Our thoughts are with his family and loved ones. SFRS personnel have carried out post-domestic incident activities in the local area to provide advice and reassurance to local residents, and a partner agency case conference has been completed as a result of this incident. For special services, we attended 1 road traffic collision in the Caithness area in the reporting period. It is important to note that we may not necessarily attend every road traffic collision in the Caithness area, so ultimately total number of incidents would be higher. And again, total number of incidents will remain low for the Caithness area in comparison to the Highland total, and are also below the total for Q1 of the previous year. SFRS have seen a reduction in UFAS incidents in the reporting period. Crews will continue to engage with local duty holders to assist and encourage a further reduction in these incidents in the months coming in further reporting periods. Although these figures will remain low and statistical analysis may be challenging, SFRS will of course continue in its prevention efforts across all incident types to further drive down these risks and prevent further reoccurrence. Moving to section 3.4 of the report, we are continuing our recruitment efforts at stations throughout the district. We have now implemented our pre-recruitment and employment programme within the district, with several new entrants having already successfully come through the programme and are now firefighters. I am happy to confirm that we have received applications for every station within the district, but of course we will continue our efforts to attract new applicants and increase crew numbers through further public engagement events. At the moment, as figures currently stand, we have 9 applications received for Thurso Fire Station. We have 3 applicants for Wick Fire Station, 1 for John O'Groats, 2 for Dunbeath, 2 for Leipster, and also we do have a further 3 applicants which have been received for Betty Hill and and 1 for Tongue Fire Station. But of course we will continue our recruitment efforts going forward, and we certainly will not be taking our foot off the gas, so to speak, and will continue to attract new applicants to work with the service. Chair, that's really my cover for the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of the committee members may have.
Thank you very much, Paddy, for the report and the update from SFRS. I think that's really useful in terms of giving members a little bit of an update in terms of the engagement that's also being carried out. And I'm delighted to hear that you are getting applicants, because there is a big issue for the community if you guys aren't getting a pretty healthy pipeline of people wanting to put themselves forward. And we're quite conscious that you're providing an absolutely vital service, albeit one that I'm hoping the majority of people won't have to use, but it needs to be there in the case that they do. So I do appreciate that update, and I hope that the recruitment drive continues to go at pace, particularly in some of the areas where I know it's been a challenge for you guys to get folk coming forward. So thank you very much for that update. I'm going to go first to Councillor Mackay, who's got his hand up. And again, if there's any other members, please raise your digital hand in the first instance. And if you can't, because you might be on a mobile phone, feel free to jump in and just get the attention of the chair. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, good to see you again, Paddy, and Michael as well joining us today. A very good report indeed, gone through there last night. And I don't think I ever got a chance to thank you for your valuable contribution during the COVID pandemic, particularly in Thurso, where initially you were on trial and the success was very good indeed, and you were still able to maintain the capacity to respond to an emergency. So well done on that over the past couple of years. Excuse me. Last year, of any interest to me, of course, being involved with the farming community, you had some terrific dry weather and a lot of significant out of control heath fires. This year, very similar hot and dry weather, but thankfully very few moorland fires that I know of that happened within our county. Just to say, Paddy and Michael, I'm particularly delighted to see now that the NHS home telecare service, particularly for people mostly elderly, living at home who may fall occasionally, this acts now as a fire alarm without the button being pressed by the householder. This is very impressive. I have experience of this where a constituent who was partly blind couldn't see the living room fire filling up with smoke owing to a blanket falling on an electric fire and smouldering away. But the alarm went off in Inverness, and the NH team alerted a listed neighbour who was quickly on the scene. This is a tremendous improvement here and a link with yourself. Paddy, I just have one question for you. On page 23, your station availability. Now, it seems there's a marked difference between the second appliance in Thurso at 14.34 compared to the Wick second appliance at 73.96 turnout. Is there an obvious reason for that? Although I see a red arrow heading downwards in the staffing change column. Thank you, Paddy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Councillor Mackay. I don't know, Paddy, do you want to take that now? Because I don't have any other hands raised at the moment. I was wanting to group a couple of questions together if possible, but if members don't have anything else, Matthew first, and then we'll take both of them in turn, Paddy. That's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paddy. Just managed to join on my laptop, but I'm keeping the camera off to try and hope I keep the signal, so I'm not being antisocial. Similar to what Councillor Mackay has said, but I also particularly wanted to draw attention to the station availability figures. Not in my patch, Dunbeef and John O'Groats both in the 60% mark. It's the Thurso one that is, I mean, that figure for the second appliance used to traditionally be in the 90%, and it's dropped to 14%. I don't think it's exaggeration to say that is really semi-disastrous, because your policy is to send 2 units to house fires for very good reasons. This means that most of the time you're unable to send those 2 appliances, which is extremely concerning, and the same for serious RTCs. As Councillor Mackay said, there's a red arrow for staffing at Thurso. I wanted to ask if the figure that's in the report is up to date, or if that decline in numbers that has unfortunately continued. And my final point is, well, 2 points. Support you all the way with the recruitment campaigns that you're doing, and this has been a long-running concern to recruit enough people for the service. And you know, there are different reasons for why there are problems. But I also believe that one of the very serious road accidents in the Thurso ward, that there was nobody available at Thurso, and in fact it was the Wick unit that had to attend a very serious incident. And medics talk very much about the golden hour, you know, getting to an incident within the hour, getting people extricated from wrecked vehicles. So sorry to be pessimistic, but the figures for Thurso, frankly, I've never seen a figure anywhere near that before, and it is obviously really concerning. We want to help, as the chair has said, but I too, like Councillor Mackay, would be interested to hear your explanation, if that's the right word, or you know, why has this happened? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rees. Paddy, if you want to kind of give outline answers to both of the members, some quite important topics being discussed there, and just if you can give us any insight into, I suppose, where we currently are, if there's any update from the published report as well.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Councillor Mackay and Councillor Rees for your questions. First of all, thank you very much to Councillor Mackay and Councillor Rees just for your kind words of support. With regards to the availability at Thurso for the second appliance, there isn't really one definitive answer as to why the figure is where it is. A number of contributory factors. First of all, the staffing numbers have not reduced further since this report was generated, and going forward, as I've said previously, we have 9 applicants on the books for Thurso, and we do have a number of applicants who are scheduled to attend recruits courses in October and November. So I would look to see that those numbers increase, with availability statistics improving dramatically going forward. Overall, our availability tends to be affected by a number of factors. Over the last, like any organisation, we do have a natural turnover of staff. So we have had a number of staff who have retired from the service and who have left for various reasons. And our availability can also be impacted on short-term issues such as sickness, and also with the summer leave period as well. So there isn't really one overall factor which is affecting this. It really is a combination of many factors, but certainly the staffing levels at Thurso haven't decreased any further, and we do expect them to increase in the months going forward. So aim to see an improved picture with the availability of the second appliance of Thurso going forward.
Thank you very much, Paddy. I don't know, members, if there's anything else that we want to add to that response. I think it's quite clear, and I think the optimism that there is applicants sitting there, and hopefully we can get them through what I know is going to be quite an intensive process for them all. I think you're saying up to November. So I think from a Caithness committee perspective, both Paddy and Michael, we're here to support wherever we can, and we do want to ensure that your service is as robust as you guys can possibly have it be. And I think a big part of that obviously is down to the recruitment, and hopefully those 9 applicants will be able to get on your books as soon as they possibly can, which will hopefully help in terms of getting those percentage numbers up. Members, if there isn't any other questions or comment, I would just like to outline that the committee has had the invitation to comment and scrutinise the area performance report for the SFRS, and to thank both gentlemen for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Caithness Area Committee. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Okay then, members, we'll now move on to agenda item number 6, as published in the papers for circulation, and that is the roads. It's the winter service plan for 2022-2023, and the report has been circulated by the Eco for Infrastructure, Environment and Economy. Now, the committee will be invited to approve the winter service plan for 2022-2023, and I think is it Josie, you're wanting to introduce the report with us here today? Please feel free.
Morning, everybody. It's nice to see everybody again. It's been a while. So as Chair said, the winter service plan for this coming winter has been circulated. For the newer members, the level of service is as agreed in the Highland Counter winter service policy that was set in 2018. It's attached, it's Appendix 1 of the report. Essentially, there is no change of the service. There's been no increase, no decrease in the service, and we're just, for COVID, we've only been putting bullet point reports through, so this is the first opportunity to bring a report plan for approval since the lockdown. So yeah, there's just basically bringing forward what we're intending to do this year. It's essentially the same as last year. There is no change. I would highlight that we do take consult our school bus teams to see if there's any changes in the bus routes, and there hasn't been this year, or we've not been advised from them unless something changes throughout the winter, but we do communicate with them. We also undertake third-party gritting for NHS medical centres and hospitals. We have an agreement there, and with the SSE we have a standing request that if in extreme cases there's issues with power supplies and power plants, that we can help them access their routes into their sites. So that's about the extent of our third-party gritting that we do. The other point of note, and it's something I always get asked on, is the winter resilience programme, where communities can come forward and apply for equipment. That's still standing. It's taken up with a varying degrees of success. Caithness is definitely more proactive in this area than Sutherland, I would say. However, it does need to be community driven and supported. In the past, we've had individuals who've sort of put their hands up, but this does need to be a community thing. So there's a link in the report to that application form, but it's online as well. And that's something we'll just coordinate once if we get any applications. But generally no changes. The map on the back gives you your priority routes. So there's the main routes, followed by the secondaries, and as always, it's not a 24-hour service we provide. It starts at 6 in the morning and we're generally done at 9 o'clock at night. So there's the morning treatment, pre-treatment in the evenings, and that's generally where we are. So that's essentially it, and I'll take questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much, Josie. Again, members will be looking to take a couple of contributions and then hand them over to Josie to hopefully keep this as focused as we possibly can. I've got Councillor Mackay, and then I've got the council leader, Councillor Bremner. Councillor Mackay first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Josie, Joanne, I like to call you actually when we're on business. Joanne, an excellent report by our roads team, of which I have every confidence in being addressed when the winter sets in. Although we haven't had severe winter weather in recent mild winters, there are still some challenges for you around our county. I like to see you have got the primary and secondary roads well identified. I know them extremely well, and acceptable target treatments, of which I congratulate you on looking at your map there on Appendix B. I also particularly like your involvement with the amenities department when required to assist with additional drivers for pre-gritting and helping to treat footpaths, etc. And also your arrangement with local contractors and farmers who also help with their ploughs to open up roads in severe snowstorms. I am delighted to see that your stock is sufficient at the moment, and that you do encourage, as you said, self-help under the winter resilience scheme, which is very beneficial indeed. Now, Joanne, I always worry for your team on these frosty mornings. After the early morning gritting commences, down comes the freezing rain just before daylight, turning the whole area into a skating rink. I do worry about that situation. So let's hope you don't see a lot of that difficult driving conditions arriving after daylight. But well done on your winter service plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Bremner.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, Josie. I hope you're well, and thanks very much for the report. And a timely report as well, August, and we're looking at the resilience, winter resilience programme. Sometimes it's a bit later. The worst thing about it is it reminds us that summer is virtually over, and that's us heading into winter now. So thanks for your report of cheer at this time of the summer months. A couple of things there. You've been mentioning this the programme that is very much picked up in Caithness. I'm delighted to hear you acknowledge that Caithness does very well with this. It helps itself to help others. It's very good in terms of the neighbourhood support that we see, and the council supporting the communities to be able to undertake that, so that it can further facilitate what the council does. Might it be an idea? I'm going to suggest this to the chair, the interim chair, in the absence of the chair, who is also the chair of the Association of Caithness Community Councils. That it would be good this year, I think, that if the board manager could actually send this information directly out to the Association of Caithness Community Councils. That way, they're encouraged to be able to get in contact with us and have a more coordinated approach through the Association of Caithness Community Councils to have that community support where they want it. And rather than all the different community councils bombarding roads or the council through different means, I think it would be good if we could have that. Because we have the report here early in August, we have the ability to, at the next Association of Caithness Community Councils, to have that on the agenda. And if Josie, you've been attending these meetings, that's been well received by all the community councils. So if you could come along to that, and by then we should have an idea of what the community councils would like to be able to do to be able to supplement that, and we can have some sort of coordinated approach. So I think that could be a really good opportunity from the fact that we've got this report in front of us in August, even though it's reminding us that winter's just around the corner. And that would also be able to supplement a refilling and supporting project, of the community, in terms of the sand buckets and making sure that the buckets are where they need to be, and that they're all filled. One wee question on that, Josie, that can be reported back to members at a later date. In terms of the sand buckets, don't tend to be secure at times when we get these absolutely unbelievable gusts of wind. They flip open the lids and then they start to become wet and actually reduce the properties of the grit and sand. So maybe that could be something that we could be looking at and makes it more effective. And finally, my point, similar to Councillor Mackay, in terms of the freeze, ice freeze, freeze thaw, which we have increasingly seen here more and more. And in terms of the properties of salt and grit and the points that we made in the report, it would be good to make sure that we have a really good understanding with the communities in terms of the properties of just what salt does and the gritting programme actually does, to be able to meet the expectations of communities when it does get to those conditions. And from the top of the Whitechapel Road to the bottom of Whitechapel Road, that has still been highlighted as an issue by stagecoach and bus driving operators. We know that we have been looking at we've been looking at improving that, and the council has done that. We've put a raised table in there, we've redone the surface. There is going to be the Wick Development Trust are doing the redesign of the bus stance unit, and Stagecoach are on record for saying that they will go back down there instead of having folks on the bridge, open to all the elements there. And as so far as I can recall at the Caithness Transport Forum, I still hear it tentatively or passively referred to by Stagecoach that the gritting policy, even though council has let them know that that should not be an issue now, they have still said passively that that could still be a blockage to them returning to the riverside. I don't want that to be the case. So Josie, if you could just confirm to me that all the steps that we're taking as a council should actually leave Stagecoach no reason for them not to return to the riverside bus stance with the money that's been put into the development that's going to be down there. I think it's a really important point for the community of Wick and for all the users of that. It's very much to do with the transport hub that we're trying to develop down there. And the last thing I need is for Stagecoach to say, no, they're still not going to go down there because they just don't have confidence in the council's gritting policy. I think that you've already addressed this point, but I think it would be a matter to put it on the record here, if you don't mind, Josie. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bremner. I think there's quite a lot to cover there, Josie, if you want to go through those points, and then I'll be going to Councillor Jarvie and to Councillor Provost McEwen.
Yeah, I'll touch on the grit bins opening at the moment. I can look in to see how we can maybe find ones with a more secure lid, but they are sort of standard throughout the council, and they are designed to be unlocked so people can't access them. It is a challenge when they flip over in the wind, but I'll take that away and see what else is out there on the market at the moment. I can bring a report on the properties of salt, when it is effective, when it's not effective, and what it can do, and also, you know, comment on what happens when it's washed off, you know, as the weather conditions, as both Councillor Bremer and Councillor Mackay have described, happen, which we have experienced in Caithness on more than one occasion, and it has been the timing of the daylight that's come in as well. Whitechapel Road, I will take that back. I will double check our standing orders, our winter routes, and make sure that we've got them included, and everything that we have put in place before is still in place, and reiterate that and come back to that one. So, and double just check what we've got to make sure we are covering it.
Chair, can I come back in on that last point there?
Absolutely.
Before we continue. Thanks, Josie. Can that be a matter, once you double check that and what have you, can I know that the council is represented at the Caithness Transport Forum, and that would be, I would very much advocate that that's a matter that's reported to the Caithness Transport Forum, so that Stagecoach can be made comment on that and firm up their commitment to the return at the Riverside. Thanks very much, Josie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bremer. I would argue maybe going one step further. I think putting a formal submission to the Transport Forum from yourself, Josie, with I think the support of this committee as well, because I think, as you've outlined, Council Leader, that the issue isn't so much that we believe that the issues have been sorted. It's ensuring that Stagecoach, I think feel pressure into actually delivering, because I think, as you've noted, that is a key. I don't want to speak for WIC councillors, but you guys have made that a key strategic investment actually for WIC, and therefore you need to have those transport links to help make that effective and add those layers of service provision that you're looking to do. So quite frankly, it's not a nice to have the Stagecoach guys down there. It's an absolute must and a necessity. So I think anything that we can do to outline that, you know, we have confidence that the roads team have got the service provision in place, and it's our expectation that Stagecoach, as a public transport provider, shall be going back into what is still deemed to be the hub or the central point for picking up public transport in the borough. Councillor Jarvie and then Provost McEwen, please. Councillor Jarvie.
Thank you very much, Provost. I just have a couple of questions in terms of the deliverability, because there's just a few parts that jump out in the report to me. In one section it states that whilst there's a number of roads operatives, most don't hold the licence to drive the snowplows. They're restricted to vehicles of 3.5 tonnes or under. So I was just wondering, what support is the council putting in place to get more people trained up to drive the full fleet of vehicles that we had? Because I know particularly during COVID it was a significant issue in delivering the service. Simply, if one person was off who had the right licence, that was a big hit. And secondly, it was one that's always perplexed me, and I did ask this question in a redesign board some time ago, and was met by a bewildered look of many senior officers who hadn't thought of this before. But that's, why is it that during winter, when our roads suffer the worst damage, are we using the roads teams to drive the gritters rather than keeping them on roads maintenance duty? It allows temporary repairs to be made when potholes first hit, because as Councillor Browner said, you get the freeze-off, freeze-thaw, which is what breaks the roads apart. And perhaps identify other workers within the council who are perhaps seasoned workers, say the grass cutting team, for example, to actually man this equipment. That gives a bit more flexibility in terms of what's actually needed at winter, because in winter we both, yes, we need the roads cleared, but we also need road repairs to be done at the same time. And you're well appreciating we're not going to have full resurfacing, but at least get remedial works in place to stop it getting much worse to the state that we unfortunately see now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jarvie. Can I go to Provost McEwen and then Josie, if you can respond to both the comments that have been made by both members, please.
Hi, Joanne. I would just reiterate what Raymond has said, Councillor Brennan has said about going to the community councils about the volunteering for the gritting and getting more buckets out into the local communities. I also would say about the lids flying off. I have one outside, I'm up a hill and I have one outside. We put a brick in ours. That was our solution. We put a brick on it, so we did. Also, I hear what Andrew's saying about the state of our roads. I've had quite a lot of emails about the state of our roads, and with the thaw and the frost and the thaw and the frost hasn't helped it much. I kind of understand that through COVID there was a lot of illnesses off and people working from home and everything, but I was just wondering when we're maybe going to get the what do you call it, the pothole pro over in our side of Caithness, because I've reports in today about the Trinky Road being very, very dangerous with the mobile homes and everything going up that way, the tourists, and I wouldn't like to see an accident happen up the Trinky Road that we've had in the past, which led to quite a few fatalities. So I just wondered if you could address that as well. And I know what Andrew's saying about, in the winter months there is a lot of other services could be helping with the state of the roads. I'll give you another one, the lighting ones, the ones that do the street lights, the grass cutters, the grave diggers, there could be a lot of people getting called in to help with the roads. That's all. Thanks, Joseph. But it was a good report. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you very much, members. Josie, do you want to respond to any of those in turn? I know that a couple of the questions are far more of a strategic. There would have to be some substantial policy changes. We're fortunate at Caithness Committee that we've got the council leader here that's listening eagerly, and will take. I can promise you, you'll take good suggestions on board and take them away. And I think actually just before that, I'll actually go to the council leader and then go to yourself, Josie, because I don't want to put you in an awkward position about trying to rewrite policy, if that's okay. Council leader.
Yeah, and very thankful for the allowing me to come back in here, because it's a learning process for an awful lot of us. But yes, the actual policy in terms of roads maintenance going forward is not a pertinent point as you're kind of referring to in this actual report that's come to us, which is to do with the winter resilience programme. The redesign board reconvenes in just a couple of weeks. It is very much on the agenda for the redesign board. All councillors are welcome to attend to that, Jan, so that opportunity will be there for everybody to feed into that. Josie is actually on. We're fortunate to have Josie on that redesign team, so she'll have taken note of your points there just now, and I'm sure that it would be better to reflect on them at the redesign board rather than this particular meeting, and concentrate on the winter resilience programme. But maybe members can reflect on the opportunities that lie ahead of them now, given some of the unrelated but related in some way to this subject matter. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, council leader. Josie.
Okay. First off, drivers within the roads team. I have a squad of about 21, and only 2 don't have HGV or LGV licenses. The majorities that hold ordinary driving licenses, that refers to the amenities, the ground staff that we work with over the winter. So our own staff all have them, bar 2. The rest, it's when we work with other services that don't necessarily have the LGV licenses, is what it is. My aspiration is for everybody that works within roads holds an LGV, so we have that degree of flexibility, but not always within amenities service do those operatives have the LGV, so that's where we'll use them somewhere else when we're working with them. We I hope that addresses that one. The road squad driving winter, not fixing potholes, that balance. Essentially what we're delivering is a road maintenance under the Road Scotland Act, and the maintenance of the roads includes the snow clearing. So you've essentially got a squad that are tasked with maintaining the road in whichever fashion, whatever it is. Unfortunately, seasons dictate what we can do. The challenge of utilising other services is you still need the trained operatives to understand, you know, the skills that are required to fix the roads. And sometimes when the weather is bad, you just can't go out and lay hot materials. You can't do it. So that there's a balance to be struck, and there is, as the leader referred to, you know, the roads review board that is looking at this and how we can work closer with other services in that respect. The difference, the challenge is we all have very little resilience within our squads and our services. So quite often you find amenities take on a lot of seasonals in the summer. They seem to have an awful lot of staff, but in the winter they're down to an absolutely essential for their burials and their minimalist work. So I won't go into that too much, but it's more of a strategic issue to be dealt with, and it would be Highland wide rather than just an area wide one. The Pothole Pro, it is out and about. It's not the only thing that will fix a pothole. You know, our squads manage before we have that. It's a specialist piece of kit, and at the moment we have only 2 operatives trained to use it. They are both based out of Thurso, so it tends to be parked up there. It will also do ditching. It's a mulching head, so you might actually see it out doing other things as well as we're getting onto it. And it is shared with Sutherland, I would like to remind members. So you will see it once we've got operative trained there. It will disappear across the border. You know, that is the intention. So yeah, it's a very useful and very specialist piece of kit, but it isn't all we use. So what I can do is I can report back on that, the Trinky Road, and we can get a look at that. But we have been using it where we can, when we can. But as I say, the operatives are also the experienced guys that are working other piece of experience kit. So it isn't going to be deployed 100% of the time.
It's just we haven't seen it over this side of Caithness at all yet.
Well, you've obviously not been where it is. I've got it. It has been over.
Okay, I've maybe been away on holiday.
As with anything, if there's no pictures, it didn't happen, right?
No, that's right,
with all of
Josie.
these things. So thank you very much for that, Josie. Raymond, more than happy to bring you in briefly if there's anything that you have to add, although I'll be moving on to the recommendations immediately.
Yes, absolutely, and it's just a point of information, and thanks for allowing me to come back in. You know that I don't normally like to talk a lot of these meetings. I've just put it in the chat there, but just for a matter of public record, Joanne and Jonathan have agreed the suggested dates that I've looked at the calendar, and as best as possible suggested dates where we can have restart our monthly roads meetings. Jan, that's as Ron and others have mentioned, these were great meetings where we had the ability to be able to catch up on where pothole pros were, how we're getting on with the roads capital programme and also the revenue, and it continues over the winter as well. So if there's any winter maintenance issues and what have you, we usually pick them up with that. But it's just that with members going through the induction process and with council being in recess, as you mentioned there just now, you know, there's a little bit of catch up to happen there. And we will be getting the pictures. I already have pictures of a lovely, nice new Brawl terrace in Hallkirk, but there is other work to do. So we'll get a catch up with that. But the dates will be going out today, and that will give you your opportunity to be able to have a more fluid discussion about roads works in Caithness and going forward. And if the chair won't mind me mentioning to Josie, you know fine well that when you say that it disappears over the border, but not for too long. I hope that it comes back and we see it very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Raymond. Thanks, Josie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Council Leader. And of course, we do not begrudge our Sutherland cousins getting good use of equipment. There's
not in the slightest.
Nothing wrong with that at all. We wouldn't possibly be accused of doing such. Committee, I would therefore be looking to move, first of all, the recommendation as published on your papers, and that is to approve the winter service plan for 2022-2023. I want to add two additional, I suppose it's not recommendations, two additional items into that, and that is that we are to provide member support to the roads team for a submission to the Caithness Transport Forum. So Josie, just let us know if you need us to sign anything or provide you with any narrative that you want, and also to instruct the ward manager to circulate the current plan to the Association of Caithness Community Councils. Are members happy with those additional recommendations?
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Thank you very much, Josie, for your attendance today and for providing the report. Is there anything further?
Just one thing on the recommendations, it was just for members to note, there are still possible impacts from COVID and abiding by drivers' hours. So if services are disrupted, we will always endeavour to deliver the primary routes first, but it was just to take note these things are still impacting on us.
I appreciate that, and of course it's important to note COVID has not gone away in the community, and for as long as guidelines, whether they're national or indeed occupational, exist, we have to abide by that. The safety of the staff and safety of the public has to be of paramount importance. So thank you very much for that, Josie.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we'll move on to agenda item number 7 as circulated in your reports, and that is the NOS traffic calming and uncontrolled pedestrian crossing points item, and that has been circulated on behalf of the ECO for infrastructure, environment and economy. The committee is going to be invited to consider the objection made in accordance with the regulations and not withdrawn. And number 2 is that to approve the construction of the traffic calming measure on Henrietta Street and Willow Bank in Wick. And that's on pages 37 to pages 47 in your reports. I believe I'm going to be going across to yourself, Ross, to introduce the report.
Yes, it is.
Can you outline I suppose, quite a high level to members first of all, and then if they have any questions or any follow-ups, I'll look to take them in the same manner as we have done for the previous agenda items. So please feel free to go on, Ross.
Okay, so the NOS traffic calming came around from the school getting in touch, concerned about vehicle speeds on Henrietta Street and Willow Bank, which obviously cut through that residential areas and is the primary route up to NOS Primary School. We've got a number of measures. It's quite an extensive scheme because both Willow Bank and Henrietta Street are very wide, very open streets, very straight. So we've proposed a number of measures on both streets, which I won't go into detail unless members ask me to, because it's in the report. But they range from speed cushions to junction realignments and some raised tables at the 3 crossing patroller locations. Is why we went for the raised tables at that point, which also help when, if for whatever reason there's an absence of the school crossing patroller, there's still a focus to remind drivers that it's a main pedestrian route on the way to the school. During consultation, it was in the paper twice, both for in December and then again in January. We sent letters to 180 residents of Henrietta Street and Willow Bank, highlighting it because it is quite an extensive scheme. We wanted to make sure that they were fully cited on it. And from that, we only received 1 objection, 2 letters of support, including the police, and 1 objection basically on the grounds that they're concerned that they will be more unsafe than the current situation, putting in traffic calming, and that we should spend the money on road maintenance instead. We highlighted to the member of the public that it's a road safety scheme. It's not money that can be spent on maintenance. It's a Scottish Government grant for cycling, walking, safer streets, which is why the member of the public didn't withdraw their objection, hence why I'm taking it to members to seek approval for construction after considering said objection. I will now allow questions.
Thank you very much, Ross, and thanks for what is quite a robust report. I think anybody who's reading it, I think you can quite quickly see what's being outlined, and one of the reasons that I would like to think that you've not received a huge amount of objections is that it's quite clear. And as always, I'm quite conscious that unless I'm unaware of the skill sets here within the Caithness Area Committee, I'm not sure that any of us can hold up our hand and say we are road or pavement safety experts, and getting the insight from officers and the recommendations is where we have to take our baseline, and we have to act accordingly from that point. This is very much an East Caithness. It's a dark side of the county issue. So he says on record. So I'm more than happy to go to members from Wick and East Caithness in the first instance to take your stall. Council Leader, I believe that you had your hand up first, and then Councillor Mackay. So. And then we'll go to Jan. So if you guys are happy to just cascade, and Ross, if you're happy to just take the points in turn, and then you can respond to the members from Ward 3. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And I doubt very much, although I wouldn't like to put words in my fellow colleagues' mouths, but William Mackay, as a former councillor re-elected, will know that this, and Jan, you probably have heard it in the town as well, many have been looking for this. This has been a road safety issue since even in my previous term, and thanks, Ross, for the information coming forward here. Yes, I absolutely endorse everything that's in the report. I'm not going to dwell on that. What I am going to dwell on is one of the points that Ross said about this is where we get an education and an understanding of just not everything that goes onto road paths and improving footpaths and all the rest of it is money available to the council to put onto roads. The other thing is that when we do get this kind of money from government to be able to support these kind of projects, it's welcome in all sorts of ways, because not only have we got a good solution or a solution that I hope will be very beneficial to the surrounding area and the safety of our community, it will also allow us to supplement any improvement that does go on pavements, because we do have to look after our pavements as well. And Lord knows it's precious enough trying to get enough money to be able to fix our roads, which is the same pot of money that has to be used to fix our pavements. So if we get extra cash from another source that allows us to look at this, then it's a double hit. But in the main, this is to improve the safety of many who have got those concerns in that area. But yeah, let's put it on record that this is not money that ever would be spent on the normal roads and pavements budget at all. This is for a specific purpose, and in this case, I think it will be absolutely money well spent, and I wholly endorse this. And I think the community will welcome this with open arms, given what it's trying to do for that area. And here's to hoping that more of these projects come to fruition in Caithness, even on what we consider the dark side of the county. Provost Mackey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Leader. Councillor Mackay.
Oh, I do not like to hear this reference of a dark side of the county being mentioned. There's no such thing in Caithness, whether it be east or west. Believe you me, after 52 years being in this county, there is no such myth. So let's forget about that. Yes, Chair, thank you. Having been involved with this proposal for several years, Ross, is a very good detailed report indeed, and a lot of work has gone involved in this. And I certainly agree with the recommendations at 2.1. Particularly, I like the idea of lowering speed limits in an effort to increase active travel choices. And I'm delighted to read you had 180 residents notified, with only one objection during January and February, along with the statutory consultees. Yes, and that objection was acknowledged and responded to greatly by yourself, Ross, so well done indeed. This traffic calming proposals can only lead to cycling, walking and safer streets around and at Noss Primary School. Well done, Ross. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackay. Provost McEwen, please.
I would just reiterate what Councillor Brenner and Councillor Mackay has said. This is long overdue and it's an excellent report, Ross. And I know more calming round about the schools is much appreciated for the safety of our children in the area, and also our elderly as well that walk the pavements. So well done, and I endorse this report wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McEwen. Ross, I'm not 100% sure you've got that much to respond to. It seemed to be quite overwhelming support from members of Ward 3. Is it possible just to outline, obviously this is the recommendation that obviously has to go through is to approve the construction. Have you got any kind of outline timeframes for that to be done? That's probably my only question from a probably the public looking in sort of perspective, or if there's anything you want to follow up from the members in Wicken East Caithness, more than happy for you to do so at this time.
No, I'd just like to thank members for their support and kind words. The timescales we'd be looking by, it's financial year tied, the funding for the project, so we'd be looking to get it out to tender as soon as possible if members approve it today. So we'd probably look at construction. It depends when we can get folk, but it would be before the end of March. But as soon as possible, really, to avoid any delays for the end of the financial year for construction.
Thank you very much, Ross. Okay then, committee. I'm quite happy. We've heard it wasn't a particularly diverse set of views from members. I think it was quite overwhelmingly supportive, and I'm more than happy to move the recommendation that on item 1 we have considered the objection that is outlined in your papers and that was done in accordance to the regulations and was not withdrawn, and given or taking into account of that, we will approve the construction of the traffic calming on Henrietta Street and Willow Bank in Wick as per the report. Excellent, that's approved. Thank you very much, members. We'll move on to a related item, I suppose, because we've got two of these coming towards committee today, this time on the west of the county, and that is agenda item number 8. And that is the Castletown traffic calming and uncontrolled pedestrian crossing point. Again, this has been circulated on behalf of the Eco for Infrastructure, Environment and Economy. And again, very much like the previous item, we are being invited to consider all of the objections that have been made in accordance with the regulations and not withdrawn. And with that being taken into account, to consider the representations received during the statutory consultation. This one seems to be a little bit less straightforward, Ross. I think it's probably fair to say. Is it? Can you outline to Caithness committee members effectively the position in respect to the Castletown traffic calming measures, and then I'll open up to, first of all, Ward 2 members if they want to make any contributions, and again, like the previous item, to all members of the Caithness committee, because this will be a decision that's made by the area committee and not just individual members. Okay, Ross.
Thank you, Councillor Markey. I'd just like to highlight, I'm not sure if you didn't mention there the approve the construction of the traffic calming, which was an update to the committee papers sent out on Friday.
That was an update to the committee papers. Apologies, I've got an old version. Yes, recommendation 3, probably the most important one to actually take it forward. So apologies for that, Ross. So yes, members, for the avoidance of doubt, the 3 recommendations, the third of which was added as a supplementary agenda item, and that is to approve the construction. So on you go, Ross.
Thank you. Much like NOS, we were approached by the school initially some time ago about the feature that's on the kind of east end of Main Street by the old post office, and we'd had a couple of iterations of design there, which unfortunately failed due to technical reasons. So the narrowing that's there, which is still 2 lanes of traffic, is the most we could get in with the nature of the road, the junctions, accesses, and etc. The kind of more contentious of the 2 is the one by the park, which is a road narrowing down to 1 lane of traffic through the middle with a priority give way feature. This came around from members of the public getting in touch, launching a bit of a Facebook campaign in the media about wanting improved pedestrian crossing, ideally looking for a lights control crossing initially at the park. We'd carried out surveys before and looked at the area, but unfortunately the demand for a lights control crossing wouldn't be high enough to justify its use. And for a number of reasons, we try not to use lights control crossings where there isn't a significant demand, because it can encourage, well, not encourage, it can result in red light running, which gives a false sense of security to pedestrians, and particularly with children can cause problems. Where the demand's lower and we try and go for something that will be a bit safer but also in this case it slows down the traffic on the street. So we went for a narrowing, bringing the road down to 1 lane of traffic. It will be 3.4 metres wide at its narrowest, but in light of some of the objections received, the effective road width for large vehicles is actually 4 metres, so your combines and large agricultural vehicles will still fit through, but there'll be a small overrun area with main vehicle traffic only having the narrower distance. So it greatly reduces the length of time pedestrians spend in the carriageway. Narrowing the road like this, it reduces vehicle speed. Looking at objections, this one's been fairly contentious. We had 15 letters of support, 1 representation and 13 objections. The 13 objections include the Community Council. And the main reason for objections is they're concerned about congestion, they're concerned about displacing traffic onto adjacent streets, and the larger vehicles, which I've already touched on, which we've solved that issue by giving them more effective road width for the big agricultural vehicles. Congestion, Main Street in Castletown, if you've ever driven down it, is already priority give way at a number of locations because there are parked cars pretty much from when you come into the village on the east. Sometimes the road is wide enough for 2 parked cars to pass and a parked car, but then once you get into the centre around the butchers, the hairdressers, the shop, it's predominantly a priority give way anyway, so it's not going to be too dissimilar to the traffic flow that's already in place. And the displacement onto adjacent streets, because the alternative options require 2 right turns or left turn, right turn, so they're giving way twice to traffic on the major routes. It's not going to be a quicker route because of all those delays. It's unlikely to be a desirable alternative. We won't say nobody will ever do it because we can't say that, but it's unlikely. We don't expect to see significant queues of traffic at this feature, and we've gone through objections with that in mind. I think that about covers everything. So if members have questions, I'm happy to answer them at this point.
Thank you very much, Ross. And I think it's really important for members whenever we're looking at recommendations where there is undoubtedly a significant volume of its objections at the end of the day. We have to take that into account in anything that we do. I think from my perspective as chair, very much in line with what I said within the WIC scheme. We're not experts around the table here. I think that we do need to take on board the professional advice that's given from the officers here. And the way that I know in some of the dialogue that I've been having with constituents over the last couple of weeks, when this has come to a head, is I know there is a degree of concern that this does not extend all the way down to, for example, where the primary school is, which I know is an area of concern for the members, or for members of the community, should I say. From my perspective, this looks to be a scheme that could be built on, and this addresses a specific area in a specific part of the village. It is not conceived to address absolutely everything that's going on within the parish over there in Castletown, and I don't think we should be presenting it as doing that. And on that basis, I personally, albeit looking at what's been outlined, I'm struggling to see any other option than to continue with the recommendations as outlined. I'm going to go to Ward 2 members first, and Councillor Rosie's got his hand up, and I don't know, Matthew, if you have any points either, given that it's just the 3 of us that will be attending the area committee today. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Struan, and thanks, Ross, for your report. I think it's really, really important that we're acknowledging your own contributions here, Ross, but also those of from the public. We touched on the fact that school emerged with the highlighting an issue, and then we had some parents and indeed children highlighting the issues at another potential black spot in the village. So I think in terms of consultation and excuse me, community empowerment. It's been a really good exercise to read a document that you produced and a report that you produced. Without, I don't want to labour on the points that were made earlier by indeed Struan, Willow and Raymond, but I think it is really important that we recognise what active travel attempts to do and the safer routes to school. It's about reducing speeds and a potential for collisions, and we all understand what that means and how it contributes to safety. But it's also about reducing the barriers, and if we can encourage kids and parents and just the general public to be more active, it's so important we understand what the benefits are in terms of health and well-being. So it's so important that we're supportive of these measures. So I think just I feel entirely comfortable that objections have been addressed appropriately, and I think it gave a really good understanding for people to witness reality. If you look on Castleton Main Street, you can exactly see what Ross alludes to and how it should all work. So, but I think it's right. The point that Struan made about maybe concerns about why is this not extended to the school, but I would imagine that these proposals, they go a long way to addressing it. One, eliminating potential congestion at school, if we can get people out of their cars and encouraging kids to walk and use bicycles, that's going to be a positive consequence. So, but absolutely, I understand. We've seen some press coverage about the west end of a village where you leave Castleton and travel to Thurso, and I think there is undoubtedly work to be done. But I think it'll be really interesting just to see what effect these proposals have, because it's going to slow traffic up, and keep the flow going. I think so. It's a really interesting start, but so we can keep in mind of that. But absolutely supportive of recommendations and more than content to approve. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rosie. Councillor Rees.
Yeah, thanks, Struan. Because we're having to spend time on it, it's because there's kind of difficult arguments both sides of this one, and it's I might be a lone voice, and I'm supposed to still listen, interested to see what others have to say. It seems to me, if you look at paragraph 5.1, there's sort of two themes here that shouldn't conflict, but there's active travel and there's safety, and they're both really laudable, and I'm keen on both. But I suppose if push comes to shove, you have to force yourself to think, what is the safest? Safety has to be paramount. That, if you take that as a given, which I do, that then takes me back to my early days as a councillor, and one of the early jobs that Councillor Mackay, Willie Mackay that is, and myself did, and I'm wondering if Willie's going to mention this, is the situation in Watton, where the same or very similar arguments came up, didn't they, Willie? And in the end, and I can't remember all the ins and outs of it because Willie led on it, but we've obviously ended up with a traffic light controlled Pelican Crossing in Watton. That too is a long straight street with perhaps more traffic on it than Castleton. It's a different type of traffic. It's the traffic going between the two towns, Castleton, NC 500. But nevertheless, if you do sort of risk assessment stuff, the traffic lights in Watton have been in place for a number of years, I'm guessing 6 or 7. And as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's been any incidents with them, heaven forbid. So that tells me that although there was disquiet at the time about the low traffic volumes, which is an argument being used here, that the lights appear to have worked. And I'm choosing words carefully here because it's not my village. Willie might be able to comment on that. So the next sort of big theme is that we are trying, and the Scottish Government are trying to bring in 20-mile-per-hour limits pretty much across all villages in Scotland, which I 100% support. And I think Castleton is a very prime candidate for a 20-mile-per-hour limit. So I like what you said, Chair, about a sort of looking to the future. But what I'm slightly anxious about is, would we be inadvertently making an installation of a 20 limit less likely? And I'm looking to Ross as the professional for an answer on that. And also, Ross, I would like to know, well, 2 points. One is because let's face it, money is short. I think Raymond referred to this as well. Money is short and we need to make the best use of what we've got. Compared to the costs of putting in a Pelican Crossing of some description compared to this work and a 20-mile-per-hour limit, how does this one financially pan out? And secondly, this is always one of my pet hates on page 28. I see, Ross, in one of your responses, and you've spent hours clearly replying to the objection letters, you have said something about that the lights would not fit with current design guidance. And my point is always with this is that's guidance. It's not the law. Each situation needs to be looked at on its merits. And just because it might not fit the guidance for the numbers of people, that shouldn't be a reason for just saying categorically we can't do it simply because it doesn't fit the guidance. I know I'm going on, Chair, but this is important. It's worth spending time on. So my more general point says you've covered the ones about wind farm loads and wider farm vehicles, which I think people were right to bring those up as points, and I'm glad you've amended the plans to do that. And it's also correct that tourist traffic is unaware of the play park, and actually it's a testament to the play park's success that there are so many children, and actually adults too, using the play park. So it's a good problem to have in a way. But I do ask myself whether or not a 20-mile-per-hour limit through the centre of the village with kind of gateways or some sort of traffic calming measure at each end of the main part of the village would be more successful, but also achieve the desired objective of keeping traffic flowing when there are no pedestrians, especially the middle of the night. I think back to the Watton point, and I also do, sorry, I do have another question, Ross. This is about cyclists. Using the proposal for adult cyclists who are on the road, does the pinch point have does the pinch point adversely affect the safety of cyclists who've obviously got a narrower bit of road? And obviously if they're coming from the direction where they should give way, not all of them maybe will. So that's a question on it. And finally, the point about the side streets, and I think one of the objectors makes this point, even if only a small number of people choose to try and save 5 seconds by going along the side streets rather than just waiting their turn at the pinch point, those side streets have zero visibility and either no or very small pavements. So for children, getting back to the safety thing, that argument I think that has to be considered. If there are particularly local people think, oh, I'll just take a quick run along the side streets, that does weigh quite heavily for me. And finally, I think I'm just checking if I've covered all the points I've got. Well, 2 points. The first one, going back to safety, and I will always come back to safety on this one, is a red light guarantees vehicles stop to let people cross the road. That is a given. Most people in our area are law-abiding. They will stop for red traffic light. I can't remember a single complaint in Watton of people jumping the red lights in Watton Village. But again, Willie might be able to come in on that one. So I think that's an important point. And finally, it's not a direct comparison, but I think about Mount Pleasant Primary School on the same A836 road, and I look at the precautions that are there especially for children crossing the road, and I compare it with Castleton, and I just wonder whether or not the pinch point is more effective than having a kind of gateway type welcome thing at each end of the built up area, along with Pelican Crossing in the centre. I have some, I think the theory that having a Pelican Crossing with lights glowing 24/7 gives the impression of a built up area, and subconsciously drivers tend to slow down because they know even though they may be seeing a green light, it can turn to red at any time. So I'm just hoping you can reassure me, please. And I apologise, Chair, for rather going over my 5-minute slot, and Ross, long suffering, but if you could answer those questions at the right juncture, I'd be very interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. I think on this one, we'd be doing a disservice to the community when we're talking about safety and traffic calming if we didn't have a full discussion on what exactly
Yeah.
the ramifications of this is. So I'm quite happy that you've made an important contribution to it. There was a number of points in there, Ross, from Councillor Rees and indeed from Councillor Rosie. If you could look to address them in the first instance, and then I'll be moving to Councillor Mackay, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'll be fine. I can do that. I've got a note, so if I'm looking down, that's why, because there was a fair number of things there to note down. With regards to the school area, that never ever actually came up with the school. And within the community, after meeting with the community council, they requested some additional speed surveys, which I carried out. And the road that runs past the school, once you come round the corner at the school, that straight road did come up with slightly higher mean average speeds than we would like. So I am looking at remedial measures in that area. But that wasn't highlighted at the initial design stages. But we are now looking at that area. I will also highlight wider community benefit, which touches on some of Councillor Rees's comments. We have said that if we have a lining crew in the area anyway, as a result of building these works, we will look at enhancing the current 30-mile-an-hour village gateways with new 30-mile-an-hour high visibility signage, 30 roundels on the road, red strips, and the kind of dragon's teeth markings, just to really emphasise coming in that you've got a 30 on all three approaches. That's something we're trying to do anyway, and if we've got a liner coming into the area, it's not a significant increase in cost to add that in. And we also kind of did agree to, if funding allows, to look at some additional dropped curbs to improve that around the community as well where we can. And as Councillor Rosie pointed out, I think it was Councillor Rosie, this is definitely not the only steps that can be taken. We've already highlighted with the community council about, I want to see Murray Place, Murray Street, the adjacent street, that one of the concerns is about rat running is there's a small section that doesn't have a footpath. And I have agreed that we will come back and look at that in a future funding year, because it does look like it's possible. It's a bit past what looks like an old factory that has no footpath at the moment, and it looks like there's plenty of ground to put one in without impacting that facility that's there going forward. So I have agreed that we would look at that as well. Councillor Rees, going through your points, I think Watton is a zebra crossing, not a lights controlled crossing, which is why we won't have had complaints for red light running. Obviously, I haven't had any complaints about people not giving way to pedestrians. I wasn't involved in that project, so I don't know what the crossing count looked like. It was a number of years ago now. I can go and find out if required. 20 mile an hours, as you know, we are prioritising 20 mile an hour rollout across Highland on a prioritisation basis. We're currently working on 13 schemes. As and when we can, we'll be rolling out to further schemes. The traffic calming we're proposing would only help support a 20 mile an hour scheme. In fact, probably more so than a lights controlled or a zebra crossing would, because it will be a better traffic management system. Particularly with a crossing that's not triggered very regularly, it won't have a massive impact on traffic speeds, whereas a pinch point will. So the narrowing would only be supportive of a 20 mile an hour scheme. Judging by the mean average speeds we've got, Castletown Main Street would need additional traffic calming on top of this to bring it down to the speeds we would want to see reasonable compliance with a 20 mile an hour limit through Main Street due to its width and its straight nature. Cost-wise, a lights-controlled crossing comes in roughly about somewhere between 45 and 60,000, depending on the civils work that's required. This will come in slightly cheaper at that one feature, bearing in mind we're doing 2 features, plus we'll do some additional gateways and we'll add in some drop curbs, although that's not on the plans submitted if funding allows. So yes, funding will go further in what we're proposing. But again, I touch on your point about guidance. Yes, the guidance says that, it's not recommended use in here, but we don't only sit on that guidance religiously. We look at other factors, and our experience is that if these crossings are underutilised by pedestrians, they do generate red light running complaints. We've got Inchmore is an example, although it's within a 40 out by Bewley. It sees significant red light running. It's massively underutilised. We are attempting to try and build on that to try and make it more conspicuous, but it's a very underutilised crossing, which does generate some complaints. Touching on cyclists, road narrowings do have an impact on cycling safety. Ideally, you would put in a cycling bypass, but with the nature of what we're trying to do, fitting in a cycling bypass isn't possible. If we went for a build out on one side of the road alone, that would make a cycling bypass possible. But what that also does, it makes it harder for large vehicles and buses to negotiate, and it generally only produces traffic calming measure in one direction predominantly, whereas narrowing both sides makes everybody slow down a bit, particularly when there's no traffic. What we have done for cyclists, we've kept that, we've got these overrun areas, which are kind of red dropped curbed areas on either side, so that the running lane is only 3.4 meters wide. If we left the full running width at flat tar at 4 meters, that would encourage close passing. Whereas having it at 3.4, the cyclists can come up, take their road space, come through the middle of that, and there isn't enough room for a car to squeeze past. Which is the risk. If we'd left it at 4 meters, just flat road, you would have had enough room, or a driver may have thought they had enough room to bring in, oh, well, I can squeeze through there. As long as the cyclist cycles with confidence, takes the road space, there isn't the space to squeeze past the cyclist visually for a driver. So we've made it as best as we can for cyclists, recognising that, yes, there is a deterioration from 2 lanes of traffic, but our hierarchy for design starts with pedestrians, then moves to active travel users, public transport, and drivers are at the very, very bottom. So we are trying our very best to make sure we get that balance of what works best for pedestrians and cyclists, so making it as safe as we can. Unfortunately, Councillor Rees, I will say that red light running is not a guarantee that people will stop. I wish it was. Red lights do have red light running. It is evidenced throughout the area. But yeah, so there's no guarantee that people will behave. Side streets, I can't guarantee no one will go down there. We don't think it will be a problem. We don't think that the queues will be such that people will think of that as a viable option. But there's nothing else. Save coming back and looking at that piece of footpath, which we would do anyway, because it's the one missing piece of footpath in the village, in that area. So we can't make guarantees on that. And I think that about covers everything that's been asked of me. If I've missed anything, I'll happily cover it again.
Thank you very much, Ross. Matthew, I'm conscious you've got your hand up. If it's directly related to what Ross has just outlined, if you could make your point quite quickly, because Councillor Mackay has been waiting very patiently.
Okay, Chair, thank you. I'll be as quick as I can. Firstly, Ross, apologies, not quite sure why I was thinking, sorry, I'm tired, pedestrian crossing rather than pelican crossing in one. You're absolutely right, wrong on that one. Thank you for that. As I said at the beginning of this, it's safety for me is the biggest thing, safety for everybody. Just very briefly, the rat running, no pavement on part of the possible rat run. I know it's not your fault, but to say if funding permits, we'll come back to that. That's a worry, because this is raw basic safety that we're talking about. And also, you were very honest about the fact the pinch point does reduce safety. I think you said that for cyclists, which concerns me. And you used the word ideally we would put in a different feature, and because of the geography, you're not able to do that. That's a concern. A more general point, Chair, just bear with me, but as you said, this is really important. For me, I'd like to know, any of these works, will they reduce the likelihood of getting a 20 limit in Castleton? Because you said yourself correctly, Ross, that schemes have been prioritised across Highland for 20 limit. if you look at the number of serious and unfortunately fatal accidents in very recent times on both sides of this village, Castleton should be right up there. And I've no idea where it is on the list, or even if it's on the list, but there's an urgency here, and that's why myself and others have been pushing to get the camera partnership van in the village and in Dunnet and at Force Strait, because there's a big problem, a really serious problem. So far, the camera partnership have sort of said it doesn't fit their criteria for being in the village. I can think of nothing better. I know I'm slightly straying, but nothing better than deterring traffic than seeing the camera van there and the thought of £100 and 3 penalty points. I wanted to ask you also, Ross, and believe me, I have nearly finished, I promise you, what were the dates of the speed surveys? Because obviously the volume of traffic in the summer months, North Coast 500, I suspect will be quite significantly different to what you have in November or January. And a final one is an observation. You were saying, and I am being a little bit pedantic here, but this is a deadly serious point. If you put 30 roundels on the road at each end of the village, I have just an awful worry that actually is going to make people think, it's okay to go at 30 through the centre of this village. And I go back to this point about safety. It should be a 20 limit. The more I'm thinking about it, even right now, I'm just thinking this is a village that's crying out for 20. So if you advertise more heavily the fact it's 30, I totally get the argument. It'll remind people not to go at 35 or 38. But really, they shouldn't be approaching the junction in the centre of the village at 30. No, because you've got the very busy shops now. You've got more traffic. You've got the car park. You've got this play park, the hotel, the church. There's so many things going on in the village that I think we should be straining every sinew to get the limit down to 20 promptly. And I really am a strong supporter. I don't like the phrase active travel because I believe most of my constituents over the age of about 40 don't know what it means. But once it's explained to them, yeah, thumbs up. So these are important points. And thank you for bearing with me, Chair. But if I could have answers to those quick questions, I'm agonising over this one. I'll be quite blunt. I'm not convinced either way, but I will listen carefully.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Rees. I'm quite conscious that there's two things being discussed here. We've got the current proposal as it is outlined in the papers today, which is effectively what we're going to have to make a decision on. And then there is the future direction of travel / commitment that I think Carl has outlined, you've outlined, and I hope I've outlined as well.
Absolutely.
That there is a wider issue or a potential wider selection of interventions that may need to be required to make the village as safe as it possibly can. And I'm quite conscious that we're putting Ross in a slightly difficult position because he can't make promises to add on to different parts of the recommendation that's currently put in there. Now, I hopefully have a partial solution there in part of the recommendations that I wouldn't bind people's hands, but make a very, very strong commitment from this committee. But I think it's very, very important that we try and, I don't want to box it in, but we try and make it quite clear about what we have the power to support or not today, and then push it forward. Ross, is it possible to respond to Councillor Rees's additional questions, and then I really want to go to Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, so covering the 20 thing, I can't stress, this will have zero bearing on the decision for a 20 in Castletown. The only thing this will do when it comes to 20 mile an hour limit in Castletown is it will make it easier to implement in such a way that we're going to see good compliance. It doesn't impact the decision on bringing Castletown forward for a 20. It has no implication whatsoever on the decision-making process for when Castletown makes it on the current working projects for 20s. So I hope that covers that aspect of it. Funding, I have to say, if funding is available for the piece of footpath on the side street, because our funding is a Scottish Government grant, it's given annually. I can't guarantee they could turn around next year and say you're not getting any money at all. So I have to put that caveat in. I have no option because of the source of funding. It's not council capital, which is guaranteed for next year. It is a government grant. So I have to say that, unfortunately. We would endeavour as much as possible to get something like that completed. But I can't make promises based on the funding source. So that covers that. But with regards to cyclists, every road intervention will have a measure of change, and there is always a balance. So does it putting in traffic calming in this way increase the chances to cyclists? Yes, can't say it doesn't, because it's putting in a road narrowing, it's putting in another obstacle. What we have done is minimise that risk as much as physically possible, with the constraints of the road and the nature of what we're trying to do to improve the pedestrian facilities in the centre of the village. The added benefits to cyclists are hopefully reduced vehicle speeds for longer in the village, which will help with that. So it's just trying to find that balance. People will be driving in that area a lot slower than they were before. So it's just finding that balance. I can't, there is no option that is 100% safe for everyone, because putting a cycling bypass in can increase the risk of cycling pedestrian conflicts, which then puts cyclists and pedestrians at risk in another slight way. So it's always finding a balance. And the gateways are a standard thing to try and improve compliance to 30-mile-an-hour limits in villages, and trying to enhance the fact, particularly in likes of Castletown, where you have a 30 gateway, there isn't actually a lot going on. The village starts 100 metres further down the road. You know, they're built up on both sides of the road. It all starts a little bit further in than where the 30 gateway is. So enhancing that gateway, putting in, you know, hello, we're here, we want you going 30. If we end up with a 20, depending what that looks like, we would put in suitable gateways as you're in a 20 now. It by no means putting a 30 on the road at the moment means that 30 has to stay. It's easy to overpaint at some point, take it up, and then put a 20 on top. I think that covers everything.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ross. That was quite comprehensive. Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Mackay. Apologies, Councillor Mackay, for the time it's taken to get to you. Your contribution's very valuable. Please take your time and outline everything. And Councillor Rosie, you had your hand up again there, but you've put it down. Is that because Ross has answered? If need be, we'll come back. Okay. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely delighted to be waiting. No problem, no problem. Yeah, Ross, you must have spent a lot of time in Castletown, because you know it back to front, the whole village. Well done indeed. I'm not want to veer down a different avenue, but I think it'd be very difficult to reach 30 miles an hour in Castletown, especially on the main street during the daytime. That's another story. Now, Matthew did touch on the Watton Crossing. Matthew, I think you have been corrected on that one. Yes, and I think at the time we were in Landward together, the old Landward ward, Matthew, and there's a wee bit more money around at the time. But however, apart from that, this is a crossing which is adjacent right to the school gate. And I think that was the clinch in getting that crossing there at the primary school. And it's well used, it's very well used indeed, as people cross from the school daily and to the local shop. So on that one. Now, getting back to this today, the Castletown traffic calming. Yes, I know it's not my ward, but this is an area I know extremely well, and a main street that I drive on a lot, nearly every day. And what I know in the report from Ross is that the pedestrian traffic volumes do not meet the required levels to make a controlled crossing an appropriate choice. I agree with that 100%. In Appendix 1, the traffic calming at the playground will work, absolutely 100%. Because evidence of this, as we've heard already, happens every day. When entering Castletown from Thurso, going to the parked cars on the left, you have to stop to let traffic heading west to pass. So that is evidence of that happening the whole time. In Appendix 2, the traffic calming at the car park, well, a lot of pedestrians cross here from the car park to the village shop, to the post box, and there's newly painted double yellow lines outside that shop. Well done to the traffic management. I think it was our traffic enforcement officer that got these painted. Well done indeed. Now, there's a lot of positive support for the pinch points, all indicating the safety increase for all pedestrians. And the displacement of traffic to adjacent streets will not happen. Believe you me, it will not happen, because it's a job to get there. There's so many twists and turns to get onto these streets and to get off them. So similarly, there's a lot of objections which have been addressed in my mind satisfactorily by Mr. Bartlett, our road safety technician. So with these comments, Chair, I certainly support the 3 recommendations to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackay, and thanks for quite succinctly outlining some of the kind of pertinent issues that are presented in the paper, because I think you've covered an awful lot of bases. Members, I'm going to be proposing that the recommendations as per your paper are put forward, but if members are minded, I'm going to add an additional 2, and I will be looking for member support for that. Recommendation number 4 will be that Highland Council officers will continue to explore future interventions in light of the average speed surveys and a lack of suitable pedestrian walkways in some parts of the village, with any intention of ensuring any intervention will support the 28 mile per hour limit ambitions. And actually, I'm not going to put an additional one because I think the 20 is made quite clear in that. I don't think that puts Ross in a difficult position where it's a commitment for funding, but it's a commitment to further explore it, which I think is important to go back to the community with, and outlines a number of the concerns that Ross himself has raised about some areas of the village that would require, in an ideal world, further interventions. And Matthew hopefully suitably captures the fact that we will not be supporting any intervention that makes a 20 mile per hour limit or a 20 mile an hour ambition possible. Matthew, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. I need to be blunt. I sense I'm probably a voice in the wilderness, so going with this. I do have significant reservations. The cyclist crossing at the pinch point might be the #1 reservation. Ross has done a fantastic job in a difficult set of circumstances, and I hope your additional recommendation, Chair, sort of stresses the absolute urgency of getting Castleton moved up the whole Highland priority list. And unfortunately, as I've said, the figures for what's happening on that road, we should be at the top for Castleton. It's really important. So thank you, and thanks for giving me so much time too.
That's no problem, Matthew. Members, we could add, given that I'm quite conscious that it is a priority, we could also add that Caithness committee states its support for a 20 mile an hour ambition for the village, but again, it needs to go through the appropriate process to get there. We can only state an ambition and a will. We can't make decisions that would be going elsewhere that could be superseded by that. I don't know, Ross, are you content that the additional recommendation is something that's workable for yourself? I'm not interested in putting something that comes back as a start item because we've not done it properly here at committee.
No, asking us to look at further measures is not a problem. We're doing it we'll be doing it anyway, but it'll just be because of workload next financial year. And yeah, stating you would like a 20, there's no harm in that either. We're working on all our settlements to be 20. It's just a case of resource at the moment. So.
Sorry, perfect. Okay then, members. With that being the case, I will move the recommendations as per. Matthew, you're not potentially moving an alternative recommendation at this time, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay then, members, I'll be moving the 3 recommendations 1 through 3 as per the updated supplementary agenda, which is to consider all objections made in accordance with the regulations and have not been withdrawn, to consider all the representations received during the statutory consultation for the traffic calming and uncontrolled pedestrian crossing point, to approve construction of this activity is number 3. That's the one that's in the supplementary agenda. For number 4, as I outlined a little bit earlier, that to ask Highland Council officers to continue to explore future interventions in light of average survey speeds and a lack of potential suitable pedestrian walkways in some part of the village, with the intention of any interventions to support any future 20 miles per hour limit, and that Caithness committee states its support for a 20 mile per hour limit for the village, and will engage with suitable consultation at any point in time that arises. Are we happy with those 5 recommendations then, members?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Ross, for all your time. It's taken up quite a lot, but it's a very important matter, so I'm quite happy that we've given it a due review and due process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay then, members, we'll go on to another partially related one here, and that is for the Borough of Thurso, and that is the 20 mile per hour speed limit, and that is agenda number 9 on your sheet. The report itself has been circulated on behalf of the ECO again for Infrastructure, Environment and Economy, and our committee will be invited to first of all note the background to the proposed 20 mph speed limit order for Thurso, to consider the objection made in accordance with the regulations and has not been withdrawn, to consider the 2 representations of support received during the consultation. 4. To note that there was 2 resolved objections and 1 letter of support received during the consultation for the associated traffic calming on Janet Street. 5. Subject to the above, to approve the making of the road traffic regulation order. And 6. To note the intention to carry out speed counts to determine the effectiveness of speed limits. There's quite a number of recommendations that are in that report. I believe, is it Lisa, you're going to be speaking to the report today, and please feel free to outline that to members, and much in the same way I'll try and group some questions together, pass them across and go back. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. As Councillor Mackey said, this paper is to do with making permanent the temporary 20 mph speed limit that is currently in Thurso. As you can see from section 4, the temporary limit was part of the Spaces for People project that was done within the council. Thurso was one of the settlements to get a 20 mph speed limit. But as you're likely aware, this was for a duration of 18 months, and the temporary order will expire in September. So with that in mind, we have carried out the full consultation with members of the public with a view to making the traffic order permanent. So permanent orders require statutory consultation. This fits with, obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about 20 limits and sort of the previous 2 items, so it's very much along the similar lines. It fits with the council's overall strategy to promote 20 mph limits in our town and residential areas, not only as a road safety casualty reduction measure, but also as a way of encouraging active travel and improving neighbourhoods, placemaking. It's a huge raft of reasons that these schemes are being promoted right around the council's area. We have provided you with the speed survey data in Appendix 1. I thought it was pertinent to put in, although we have no outstanding objections to the proposed traffic calming measures on Castle Green Road and Janet Street. I thought it was important that you had the whole background to the whole scheme. The only outstanding, consultation-wise, Appendix 2 shows the whole area of the 20. Appendix 3 is the schedule of the roads. And as you'll know, there's the 1 outstanding objection that we were unable to resolve during the consultation period. So you have got our summary of all these representations in Appendix 4, and Appendix 5 lists all the correspondence and the response that has gone back to the outstanding objection. I think that sort of sums it up, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and again, thank you for quite a robust report. I think for members who, I think all the members who are on the call have represented the town for a number of years. I'm very glad that our Spaces for People money went towards this and not some of the interventions that were in Inverness, because I know it has been no end of grief for local members in the city, and actually this was pretty well, it was welcomed at the time, and certainly from a lot of my feedback, it continues to be welcome. I think the problem maybe is enforcement. It's not the principle of the 20 mph. It's actually trying to get as many local people, because I think there's always a risk of saying, well, the visitors might not know stuff. It's the local ones that do and should know better to abide by some of the 20 mph limits, and particularly in places such as Castle Green Road, which I know I've picked up a number of bits of casework for continued issues around about traffic violating that 20 mph limit. I'll be going to Thurso members, Thurso North West Caithness members first, and then more than happy to go into any Caithness wide members after this point. But I think you summed up very clearly at the start, Lisa. This is looking to make what was a temporary limit permanent, and we'll be looking for the support of the members there. The only one additional point I do want to make, and that is the little bit of cluttering that we do see in the town, because although the Highland Council Roads Authority has been very good in blanketing effectively all of the areas of the town with the 20 miles an hour, it does sit slightly adjacent to what is obviously happening on the trunk road, where Transport Scotland have effectively outlined the 20 mile an hour runs through a small section of the town. And although it's not a recommendation to be going in the to yourself, Lisa, in terms of this report, I would like to be making representation to Transport Scotland that I think it would be a more cohesive 20 mile per hour limit across the whole of the town if that was extended further, because I think that does cause some unnecessary confusion in terms of going from a 20 back to a 30 back to a 20, depending on where you are. So I'll go to my ward colleagues first. Councillor Rosie or Councillor Rees, have you got any comments to make on this, or are we happy to go through with the approvals as noted in the report? Councillor Rees.
You'll be glad to hear that I at least am happy. Very happy, and I'd like to thank Lisa and her colleagues for the work. It seems to be, well, it is a long time that's been in coming this. It's good. On the question of enforcement, I don't think there's an easy answer. Like you, Chair, I've had literally, well, no, a lot of people saying to me as you're coming into the town centre from Scrabster, ironically, roughly by the police station, you know, people are not dropping down to 20. 2 or 3 years ago, I think Police Scotland probably got it wrong when they said they would not be enforcing the 20. I personally think that it would have been very helpful to have had a different approach from the police, even if it wasn't very much enforcement. A little goes a long way, and it's hugely significant in deterrence. You know, don't have to say it to anybody here really, but you know, if 2 or 3 people got a ticket for speeding the 20, they will be chatting to their friends and colleagues and other people round about. Word would spread quickly through the town. So still think it may be the local police have the discretion perhaps to do something about that. And also on the enforcement side, I think we shouldn't beat ourselves up about this too much, because I think, you know, it's rather like drink driving. It took years and years to bring drink driving down. Yes, there's still some, but compared to what it was like 30 years ago, for those who can remember, it is greatly reduced, and socially the attitude towards it has completely changed. And I'm pretty confident that within 5 to 10 years, nearly everybody will go at round about 20 or less through the centre of Thurso, through Wick, through Castleton, he says, hopefully. And you know, we just need to keep at this. It's not going to be achieved overnight, but one thing we don't do is we do not give up. And we keep at it. And Lisa, work with you in my former role and this role. Wish you all the best with your continued work. You're a very small department with a massive amount of work, so thank you.
Absolutely concur with that, Matthew. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Struan, and thanks, Lisa, particularly in that final comments. Yeah, you are a very small group and you work incredibly hard, so thank you very much. Look, I welcome the move to permanence here. I think it makes absolute sense given the you know, discussions we've had in the previous 2 agenda items. The really important point made by Struan on trunk roads and the representation with Transport Scotland. If it is something we need to address, it'd be interesting to hear Lisa's comments. I think a final point, you know, thinking about today's contributions and debate as a responsibility for drivers, and these recognising the changes that we're making here, you know, who cannot understand what the intent here is in reducing speeds, increasing safety, you know. So, and I think it's quite interesting that as long as we keep the debate going, I think that fulfills something within communities in itself, you know, because it's going to change culture. So I think you're right, Matthew, that comments you made about culture and drink driving. I think absolutely right. If we can change people's attitudes, and if there is a need to educate further about active travel, I think we should take that opportunity. You know, if we can perhaps presentations to community council associations, and you know, intent of all these things is absolutely around increasing road safety and pedestrian safety and the important thing about active travel too. So I think I'll leave it at that, Struan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl. Lisa, I don't think you've got any substantial issues to address there. Probably the one for both myself and Carl immediately would be, is there a tact for approaching Transport Scotland and how, even if it's just making representation on the basis of this committee, is that something that would potentially come through for yourselves? Would it be helpful to have some sort of very obvious member support coming through the committee in that respect? Because I think it does make complete sense to harmonise the 30, essentially as soon as you hit the town boundaries, that it makes sense that you're in a 20-mile-an-hour zone.
I think any support that the committee can give us would be greatly welcomed, and very much welcome your positive comments. We liaise very closely with the Trunk Roads Authority, and obviously as the local authority, we're not allowed to promote the traffic order on their road. Trust me, I've checked. So all we are doing at the moment is keeping them very abreast with where we are in our, it's like we are doing this, it's going to committee on this date, and should it get support, it will go live on the next date. And they obviously have their sort of deadlines as to when theirs runs out, etc. So I think, yes, I think we would very much welcome any support, that sort of basis from the committee, absolutely. Do you want me just to cover the other couple of bits that were?
Yes, if you could, Lisa, that'd be great, and then I'll be bringing in Councillor Mackay afterwards.
So I think enforcement was one Councillor Rees and Councillor Rosie obviously mentioned there as well, and I think very much in agreement there, and that's why all our schemes are sort of currently designed to be self-enforcing, which is why they're very much based on the existing mean average speed data. And that's obviously the reason that we brought forward a traffic calming scheme for Janet Street, and the one that's been brought forward for Castle Green Road as well. I think, very much as everybody said, it is the direction of travel nationally. We can see this coming at pace right around, the country. And I think we take heart, the results that have come from the Scottish borders. On average now, our signing and lining schemes alone in Highland are seeing a 1 to 2 mile an hour drop. Theirs purely signing and lining alone, when it was brought in through spaces for people, we're seeing up to a 9 mile an hour drop. And I think that's because, it was done all in a oneer effectively. So I do think, when this becomes the norm, and as you say, it is like the drink driving thing, it took 20 years to become socially unacceptable, that way. So I think we can all take heart that this is the sort of direction of travel.
Super. Thank you very much, Lisa. Councillor Mackay.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me in. Very interesting subject indeed, yes. Just first of all, the comments made by the drink driving, I'm not so sure I agree with that, because I attend all the police meetings, and drink driving is very much on the increase as far as I'm concerned, even though the limit is lower than it ever was, and it's very disappointing to release figures. However, that's my comment on that. Sorry for that, Chair. But Councillor Rees said that this traffic calming would be realised in the space of 10 years. I think it will be a lot shorter than that. A lot shorter than that, because in Wick it is working. Now, when this was first mooted in Wick, we got a huge lot of representations, a lot of scenarios saying that my car won't go at 20 mile an hour. It's just impossible, it'll stop. But about slowing down to 20, it will work, I can assure you, and it is working now in Wick for the safety of everybody. So thank you for allowing me these comments, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackay. Unless there's any further representation from members on the committee, I'll be looking to move the recommendations that are 1 through 6 as per your agenda, and I'll be adding recommendation 7, and that is to make available member representation to Transport Scotland in respect to harmonising the 20 mile per hour limit within the town boundaries. I'll keep that as open-ended as required, Lisa, and just let us know how you might want that support to come through committee. But if it's agreed as a recommendation, it will be taken as read there. Councillor Rees, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't going to mention this, but bearing in mind what you've just said, firstly, I agree. Secondly, we've been, I can't actually remember how long it's been going on, but we've been asking Bear to look at reviewing the speed limit on the south side of Thurso, past the Park Hotel, up to the cemetery. The last thing Colin Watson said to me was they were sort of trying to decide, should it go straight to a 30 at the end of the Stainland Strait as you come into Thurso, when you've got the cemetery on your left, or should there perhaps be a 40 and then somewhere round about the Park Hotel it would drop to 30? I don't really have a strong view on it, but it's just, Lisa, you're probably aware of all this, but it's just really, that should be part of this debate, although it's not strictly the town centre. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Matthew. And I think that given that we're looking to harmonise within the town boundaries, I think that would hopefully be captured and we can add flex. But because I agree with you, I mean, as soon as people get past the park, it's a bit hairy scary, if I'm being brutally honest. But yeah, I think it's trying to make it as from my perspective, and I don't want to speak for the chair or indeed previous chairs, I think it's very, very important that the committee outlines if there's any ambitions and there's any strategic things that we're wanting to do. And I think it's quite clear that from our perspective, we've heard it in Wick, we've heard it in Castletown, you've heard it in Thurso, that road safety, pedestrian safety, active travel safety, effectively safety on our walkways and roadways is a key priority for our members, and we're articulating it through the committee. And when we get a recommendation that we feel does not address absolutely everything, I think it's important that even though we might not have money to go to it right now, we set out what ambition that will be. And even if it's a Highland Council ambition, or indeed it's an ambition for another authority to look at, I think that's the appropriate juncture that we take. And that's why, to me, additional recommendations should not be seen as a bad thing. It should be seen as trying to strengthen the hand of officers to carry out the will of the members. So I think that's the way that we should be taking that. Lisa, I believe that's all 7 recommendations approved by members. Am I correct? So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate the report, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of these being made permanent, which is excellent.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. Okay, members, I make that 12 o'clock. So can I propose a 5-10 minute comfort break, and we reconvene at 10 minutes past? That's okay?
Perfect.
Grand. Good.
Super. Okay, catch you in 10 minutes. Thank you very much, members. We've got a couple of items left on our agenda for today's Caithness Area Committee. I'll move on to agenda item number 10 on your circulated reports, and that is the Thurso Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. And that is a report that's been circulated on behalf of the ECO, again for infrastructure, environment and economy. We're going to be invited to note the public comments and agree the council response according to my papers here today, and then recommend that the strategic committee, which is the Economy and Infrastructure Committee, formally approve and adopt the Thurso Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, and that would be done 10th of November 2022. Apologies for my ignorance at this point. What officer will be doing the introduction for this? I don't feel 100% briefed.
That'll be myself, Councillor. Yeah. I'll give you a bit of an introduction and just outline some of the issues as we see them.
You.
Okay.
Very much like the previous items, Andrew. If you can just give the outline, I'll then go to a grouping of members. You can take questions, and we'll go back and forward in that vein until we've exhausted any representations from the members of the committee. So please feel free to outline the report.
No problem. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members. So Thurso Ward members will already have seen both reports, the appraisal and management plan, which were presented to the ward business meeting in March, just prior to this 6-week consultation. So just as very briefly, as well as the council having a statutory duty to designate and preserve and enhance conservation areas, we also have a statutory duty to formulate and publish proposals for their preservation, management and enhancement. And so these reports have been produced to satisfy that duty. So Thurso Conservation Area, it's gone through a series of changes since its designation in the 1970s, and this is the first reassessment since 1987, since when we've seen significant changes in legislation and conservation practice, changes how we manage our most sensitive heritage areas. And so the appraisal and management plan, they're in the appendices. I'll not go into too much detail on their content, other than to say they set out the background to the project, the history, they define its character and appearance, and they also take a fresh look at the statutory conservation area boundary to check that it still encapsulates all that's of historic and architectural importance, that it's logical, that it follows definable boundaries. And the management plan details some of the challenges the conservation area faces, outlines some of the opportunities. In terms of the public consultation, again, that process is outlined in the paper. The consultation was publicised on the council's consultation portal, where there was promoted social media posts. We sent letters to all of the residents within the existing and proposed conservation area boundary. It was circulated by a stakeholder group, and we also undertook direct consultation with, for example, Historic Environment Scotland and the Scottish Civic Trust. We held 2 public drop-in events at the North Coast Visitor Centre in Thurso, one in March and one later on in May. And these were intended to give the public the opportunity to discuss the reports, the proposed boundary changes, let us know of any sort of concerns or issues. And it helps us ensure that we're covering the issues that are of most importance to the local community. And I have to say that the attendance at both events, but especially the second, which was advertised and notified separately, was really encouraging. Over both events, we spoke to just under 100 individuals, the majority of whom, well, in fact, all of whom were incredibly engaged. They were hugely interested and highly knowledgeable about Thurso's history, what they found to be important, both in terms of its heritage and its future. And what came through really strongly was how much those we spoke to really cared for and are really actively invested in the town's past and its future, taking pride in its heritage. So really, really encouraging. And the responses and the comments from the consultation, like I say, they're all summarised in the report and also in Appendix 1. And they sort of give a broad flavour of the range of subjects and topics that were covered during the consultation. And in many cases, these comments, they've resulted in the appraisal and the management plan and boundary being amended. And just to touch on a couple of the more divisive issues in detail, both of which are in regard to the proposed conservation area boundary amendments. There is a map of the amendments included in Appendix 2 for ease. Most of the boundary amendments that we're proposing are actually uncontroversial, and the consultation expressed support for the majority. But the one that perhaps resulted in the most discussion was the removal of Old Thurso, the former medieval quarter, which is shown as E1 in Appendix 2. And that really did split opinion, and which we were actually expecting. So there were very strong views, both for and against, as are summarised in more detail in the paper. Suffice to say that we do not disagree with the views that the area has important characteristics, but the most significant of those heritage aspects are either separately protected, such as Old St Peter's Kirk, for example, or they're unlikely to ever see significant adverse impact, such as the street pattern. And the area, it's largely dominated by 20th century housing, which, although that in itself is actually of a very high quality, on balance, our view is it does not justify or warrant conservation area designation and doesn't warrant the restrictions and additional controls that come with that designation. So on balance, and whilst acknowledging that there are important qualities in that area, and also acknowledging that there are very different views as to whether or not that area should be within the conservation area, it remains our recommendation that it should be removed. It would be better and more proportionately managed out with the conservation area. And the other area which did spark a degree of debate was is marked as A2 on the map in Appendix 2, and that's to do with an area we're proposing to bring into the conservation area to include within the boundary. And here, one of the property owners has not welcomed the addition of his building, Springbank House, and the written response of the owner and our proposed council position are included in Appendix 1. We have made a number of changes to the appraisal in response to this consultation response, and we've also met with the owner to discuss the concerns. And since that formal response was submitted, the owner has approached local members as well, and we've since discussed these issues with members and have written to the owner with a letter of reassurance as well, confirming what's likely to be acceptable with regard to making alterations to his property should it be included in the conservation area. We've not actually had a response to that letter, so we hope that that has actually provided sufficient comfort and clarity for him moving forward. But I think it is worth reiterating that in conservation and heritage terms, Springbank House is of historic and architectural importance, and it does, and indeed would, make a positive contribution to the conservation area. And it's also notable that that view was also expressed by a significant number of those at the public drop-in events who also felt that Springbank House was an important part of the historic streetscape and river frontage specifically. And in fact, some of them were actually querying why it was missed out the last time Thursday was assessed. And I think that's a fairly fair observation, actually. So I appreciate these are long reports. I appreciate they cover a lot of ground, and also that I've probably spoken for too long already. But happy to discuss any other points that these have raised or to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that overview, Andrew. And I know from the engagement you've had from members for a number of months now, thank you for going back and forth and responding to queries. And because this is, if I'm being honest with you, when elected members or prospective elected members are going up in front of the public, this is not something that you're immediately jumping on top of and thinking is going to be in your email box. So the steer and the guidance here has been particularly useful because it's not necessarily all in our bailiwick, so to speak. Like a number of the very much area specific items that we've discussed today, I'm going to look for contributions from the local members first, and then of course open it up to the rest of the membership from the Caithness Area Committee. I'll look to my colleagues in West Caithness, for Councillor Rosie and Councillor Rees, if you have any comments, any observations, or any take on the recommendation as they are presented to us today. Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, Andrew. Sorry for my camera being off. My internet connection is a little bit wobbly. My goodness, things that we're asked to decide as councillors that are really important. We've just been doing a really critical road safety one that's been very difficult, and this one is as well. So conscious that we are just lay people and not experts on this. As you've referred to, myself and certainly Councillor Gunn, possibly Councillor Mackie, I'm not sure, or Carl, but we've met with the gentleman at Springbank House, yeah, and he has been pleased to get your letter of reassurance. Ideally, he would still like his property not to be within the conservation area, but he acknowledges the work that's been done. On the arguably even more difficult topic of the oldest part of Thurso and whether it should come in or come out, one observation, one question. The question is, I have been underwhelmed by the sort of assistance from national bodies that the conservation group have had for Old St Peter's. I wonder what more can be done. I'm going to be blunt because we need to be honest with our constituents. They have worked hard. As a former councillor involved with that group, Roger Saxon, him and many others, they are really trying, and you acknowledged yourself a great level of support, and there's not been much sort of real assistance, I would say, from a national level with the preservation of Old St Peter's. Is there anything more that can be done to help them with that? And secondly, my kind of observation is, a lot of this debates about whether or not modern windows can be used, to replace traditional ones in a conservation area in order to improve the energy efficiency of houses. And considering what we are imminently facing with energy bills, the thought has gone through my mind that for some people, if their old houses become impossible to heat within their financial means, those houses could reduce in value. And yes, I am speculating, but they could go down in value. They could even become unsellable. Or if they're not lived in for a couple of years and get damp because they're not being heated, then they could get to the stage of being abandoned. I know that sounds a little bit extreme, and that argument has to be balanced against the one about if you're in a conservation area, the traditional windows look the best. I don't really have a straight answer to it, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, because I think my instinct is telling me if ever there was a time when we need to face up to actual hard financial realities about things like modern windows and the merits of them, it's now. So I'd be interested on those 2 points, Andrew, to get your advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I'll go to Councillor Rosie and then to, I'll then go back to Andrew, if it's okay, and then I'll go to yourself, Jan, after that point. I think 2 contributions will be enough to take down for Andrew.
Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Andrew and Sarah. It's nice to see you again. Absolutely agree with comments made about work that's going into the report, which is a huge amount. It's really encouraging to get your feedback on the level of engagement from general public. Questions, and I generally agree with everything else that's been said. On the removal of Old Thurso, and it was interesting, I forget how you phrased it, Andrew, but you spoke about being able to protect these areas using existing measures. But one of the most consistent casework items I get is what can people do? And I forget, and apologies if I've asked you before, but something in my mind tells me that we had a confirmation that double glazing and it was always a question, but it came up, I think it was on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, where there was I'm seeing you laughing there, Andrew, I think I could where there was an old building, but they were able to put double glazing, and it ties into what Matthew's saying about energy concerns. So if you can just expand on that a wee bit, Andrew, and how you think that we will be better able to manage that out with, in the context of your recommendation. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Carl. Andrew, do you want to respond to both the contributions?
Yeah, absolutely. If I take the Windows issue first, if I may. Windows are always the main and most significant issue that come up when you speak about conservation areas. In general terms, I wouldn't conflate the idea that modern windows are better than traditional windows. Modern windows and traditional windows, you can get modern traditional windows, for example, modern timber windows that are sash and case windows, and they're traditional windows. Very often the argument is between UPVC windows, plastic windows versus timber windows. That's normally where the discussion comes in. In terms of energy efficiency, traditional windows can be just as effective as UPVC modern windows, and in fact in many cases they can be more effective. You can get double glazed traditional sash and case windows, you can get triple glazed sash and case windows, you can get really good high quality modern secondary glazing. And these days, secondary glazing is not the same system of glazing that was used in the 60s and 70s where flies went to die. This is actually really high quality glazing. It actually gives you a better U value, a better thermal performance than most double glazed windows will give you. So actually, and also you can take historic windows that still contain historic window glass or historic frames, which are still going to probably be good for another 50 to 100 years. And you can put in double glazed slim profile glazing, which will then give you a very comparable thermal property as modern UPVC windows, and at a fraction of the cost as well, because you're just adapting your existing frame rather than looking to get brand new windows. There's also a sustainability argument as well with UPVC. UPVC, it's a plastic. It is in part recyclable, but not in its entirety. And most UPVC windows will be you'll be looking to replace in 20-25 years at best. Timber windows, they are more expensive, but they will be there for 100+ years if you look after them. But they do come with a maintenance requirement. So there's positives and there's negatives. But timber windows, and the takeaway though, really, I would suggest is that timber windows can be just as effective, if not more effective, than UPVC. And of course, then there's the benefits to the character of the conservation area, which I appreciate for many people. That won't necessarily be the first thing on their list of priorities, but it is an important aspect when you're looking at the preservation and enhancement of a conservation area. With Old St Peter's, yeah, I agree. Old St Peter's, it is probably the jewel in the crown of Thurso, and I do recognise there's a slight contradiction here with having Old St Peter's in a part of the conservation area that we are looking to remove from the conservation area. However, it is a scheduled monument, so it has the highest level of heritage protection already, and that's not going to change whether it's in the conservation area or not. So the conservation area doesn't actually give St Peter's anything additional in terms of protection or in terms of access to funding or in terms of access to regeneration. There is a meeting that's going to be happening very soon with our own property services and Historic Environment Scotland and a structural engineer from Fairhursts, where they're going to be looking at some stabilisation works of St Peter's, and I believe that there will be members of the trust involved at that meeting as well. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come, and we will start to get some work done there as the council is the owner of that property, to actually start to stabilise some of the less or some of the more concerning aspects of that building with Historic Environment Scotland's advice and consent as well. And then I would certainly support the trust then being able to open up the building more regularly and more often to the general public, and actually so it can be made, so it can become more of an asset for Thurso than it currently is.
Thank you very much for that Andrew, and I suppose outlining the fact that it's far more complex, and I think some the kind of, let's just say, the obvious questions and answers that come up. There's a lot more to it, and you certainly can't just take things at face value. I think in a number of these discussions, albeit you've acknowledged that there is a cost factor that must be considered. That everything has to be taken in the round. I'll go to Provost McEwen, please. Janet.
Thank you, Struan. Andrew, you've actually answered some of my questions, because quite a lot of it was round about St Peter's, and you've answered that really, really very well, and it is a really good report. I'm still a wee bit unclear about the windows and conservation areas and properties, because we have a lot of ones over here in Wickside, and I know there's been a lot of not complaints, but people have actually approached me quite a lot, because the windows that you are wanting them to put in are very expensive, and they can't afford the windows that they want to put in. I can think of them particularly at a church, and has flats, and the quoted cost for replacing these windows was over £80,000 plus that, I was told. Now, there is no way a small congregation can afford these. But I can have a discussion with you about that at a later date. I don't want to hold a meeting up, and maybe you can help me clarify that up with one of our members over here. But that's fine. But no, you've answered it more about St Peter's, because I know a lot of things had to be cancelled because of the structural and the health and safety issues. But no, that's fine. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Jam, for that, and absolutely, I think the appropriate place to discuss. Although I'm more than happy to bring in some of the general themes around about conservation areas. Yourselves on the East in Wick, you've got your own stuff to be looking at there. And again, one of the points to go back to, Andrew, is actually around about the frequency of the reviews, because I think it's almost a shame that it's taken this long, and that's obviously no criticism of yourself. You guys are getting round to it now, but in the past, the various forms of local authority that we've had, because if I look at what I perceive as the kind of traditional look in Thurso, to me, the area that would warrant conservation extends a little bit, certainly including Miller Academy and the train station, and then up towards the Ormley Villas, which are the traditional Victorian part of the town. But of course, that would have been anchored on the former Viewforth House that was dismantled by the by the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, which they certainly wouldn't have been allowed to do if it was within the conservation area. And that's something that we look back on as a huge missed opportunity to safeguard it, but unfortunately there was no safeguards in place to make that happen. So I think as much as anything, it does need to be reviewed far more regular than once every 50 odd years. And I appreciate it'll take you time to go around all the towns and the city in order to do that. But I think it is an important it's an important tool that we have to protect the stuff that we want to be protected, that gives the towns and dare I say it, the villages of the cities their kind of the look that they have, the feel of the area, in addition to to protecting the actual buildings itself. I'll bring in the council leader, if that's okay, Raymond.
Thanks very much. It's just more an observation, and appreciate for new members the representations that they'll be receiving, just as some of us received when we became new members as well, Jan, and on very similar points as well. But the point that the interim chair is making just now is well made. It's more to do with the frequency of the review, because this is Thurso going through the review, but WIC has already just done it. It was approved at the Economy and Infrastructure Committee last September. So we've just finished our conservation. But just for assurance, that process was robust. Lots of representation. Ward 2 colleagues will remember, Ward 3 colleagues going through this. Some very robust representations made, where we had to actually reconsider some of the WIC conservation area and the actual outline of it, because of the implications that it was going to have on the WIC Harbour area. And the WIC and the Port and the WIC Harbour Authority made really good, well-placed, robust representation on a similar vein. It was well considered by council and members of the Caithness Area Committee. It was reconsidered and it was adjusted prior to being finalised and going to the Economy and Infrastructure Committee. The balance in that is the fact that where there are the representations of the costs of repairs of windows and the sensibility of what can be put in there. The reason that the conservation area exists is because if you're on planning, and some of the planning requests that you get would be absolutely, totally, wholly and utterly out of order in terms of how they would sit within the amenity of a conservation area. So the consultation is to try and strike that balance without impacting really on what is an asset of the town. And in the town centre and in the lower Pulteney area, but yet still being practically sensible about it. It can be really, really challenging, and that's why it went through that robust process with the same representation in terms of the costs of different styles of windows, sash and case, traditional sash and case, double glazing, triple glazing, the kind of glazing that they would be expected to fit. Doors, whether they should be PVC as opposed to hardwood timber, all that was gone through in that consultation. So it can be difficult, but it is, as modern times move forward, probably the frequency of how often that we actually look at this, as the chair said there just now. But just for a bit of assurance, it will still be a niggle for those who purchase properties in a conservation area and then find out that maybe they can't afford to maintain the purchased property, or where it's an inherent, like Jan said there just now, it's a church, and smaller congregations struggling with income and finding it really difficult to be able to maintain a very large property. It can be really challenging. But the consultation I'm seeing here and the one that we've just gone through in WIC has been rather robust, and it still is. It still, as I understand it, has the flexibility to seek those representations from members that could, materially change what will end up coming to committee. So thanks for the report, and that's really all I've got to say about it, Chair. It's more observations on what we went through in Ward 3 already.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Bremner, and you're completely right. It is within the purview of the members to outline what is palatable to us, and I think what we saw in the WIC case, and although I'm obviously a Ward 2 member, we were engaged in that. And the one thing I would probably, as a takeaway, we've seen some very area-specific items here, but we've got a collective responsibility to agree positions on them at Caithness committee. Very much like when we're down in Inverness, there is a collective position that we have to take. And I feel that was the sensible thing forward. What we're seeing here in terms of recommendations is obviously a number of removals. One addition which seems to be broadly supported. There doesn't seem to be an issue with the A1 addition. It's obviously the A2 one that has received a volume of correspondence in that respect. Councillor Rees. You're on mute, Matthew.
Apologies. I'm conscious that Ron's not with us because he's taken a very close interest in this agenda item, but that's where we are. Andrew, Sarah, just to sort of very gently put you on the spot, a lot of this, as Councillor McEwen says, it hinges around the extra cost of what I would call the traditional type of windows. Very roughly, and you can probably guess what's coming here. I mean, what is roughly, I accept they can last for a lot longer, but what is roughly, in the most general terms, the increase in purchase capital cost for a typical timber window compared to a typical PVC replacement in general terms? A couple of other things after that, but that's a really important point for me, and I suspect for people in the houses that we're considering.
Thank you, Matthew. Andrew, Sarah, are you happy to field that as best as you can?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very difficult question to ask. Obviously, you can get really bad UPVC windows. You can get UPVC windows that are considerably better. You can get really bad timber windows that probably aren't going to last much longer than UPVC windows, and you can get really high quality timber windows. Undoubtedly, there is a big cost difference between UPVC windows and timber windows. There's no point trying to deny otherwise. They will cost an awful lot more money. There are, as you say, sustainability benefits, there's heritage benefits, there's retaining the value of the building benefits. There's lots and lots of benefits I could try and persuade you of, but it does, there's no denying the cost is significantly more. What I would say is with UPVC windows, what we do not look to do is retrospectively apply conservation area designation to buildings. So if they already have UPVC windows, they already have UPVC windows. And what there is within planning and within the way we manage conservation areas, if there's no material change to the character of the conservation area, you can make changes within that, and that is not development. So if you can source a like-for-like replacement for your UPVC window, you can install that without planning permission because no change has occurred to the character of the conservation area. Therefore, that is not development. And so if you have UPVC windows, you cannot afford timber windows, then you need to look to find a replacement UPVC window, which is more or less exactly the same as the one you currently have. There's nothing we as a planning authority can do about that, as much as we might like to. It is then, that's not development. It's perfectly legal and it's perfectly right for that property to have that window replaced. So there is, if you like, an outlet for those circumstances where financially those changes are completely prohibitive. For new properties, we may take a slightly different approach whereby, or for extensions to historic buildings, for example, and we will say you need to put in timber windows. And then generally speaking, to be honest, we very, very rarely get complaints or we get applicants coming back to us saying, but we want to put UPVC windows in. 9 times out of 10, it's just accepted and the development goes ahead with timber windows.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. But to be absolutely clear then, for the house owners who have timber windows and are needing to replace them, if they're in the conservation area, they have to replace, broadly speaking, like for like timber for timber. That's the case, isn't it?
Yeah,
okay.
But again, I would say though that there is nuance there as well, because if you have historic timber windows, very often they're saturated in lead, they're hardwood, and they will last another 100 years. Very often, all you actually need to do is replace the rotten sections. Very, very rarely do you find a historic timber window that cannot be repaired. Very often people don't like to repair them, and it can be quite difficult to find the tradespeople to repair them, but they can be repaired if it's taken out a slice of the sill, taken out a slice of the rails and repairing it with new timber. That can normally be done relatively cheaply and relatively easily. And then you fit double glazed units into the existing frame. Again, all of that is a lot cheaper than buying UPVC windows. So retrofitting and draft proofing your existing historic timber sash encased windows is always the preferred approach. It's normally always cheaper, and you will end up with windows that will outlast UPVC replacements as well. So there's lots of different options, and it's never as straightforward as UPVC is better or cheaper than timber. There are always other routes that people can take, and we do try and advise people of this whenever they come to us for that advice as to what they can actually do.
Okay, thanks for a straightforward answer. That's the sort of first question. The second one for this is to try, is there any possibility to try and satisfy both the conservation group and the homeowners? Is there any possibility of amending the plans so that Old St. Peter's itself remains in the conservation area? You used the phrase, it's the jewel in the crown. I completely agree with you. It is the absolute jewel in Thurso's crown. And my sort of gut instinct is that there's something completely crazy, subjectively, to take it out of the highest, the conservation area. It just seems totally, utterly illogical, although I understand the bigger picture. But would it be possible for Old St. Peter's itself to remain with that level of protection? And I know you're going to say, or Historic Environment Scotland would say it's already got the highest level, but if it's not actually in our local conservation area, it's losing something. So is it possible for it to be in the area, but the adjacent residential premises not to be, so that they can, in this time of totally unprecedented fuel costs that are looming very, very shortly, that they can, if they so need, fit all they can afford, which, for many people, let's face it, is going to be the UPVC, bearing in mind the heated costs that we're all confronting. So is that a possibility to amend the proposals in that way?
I agree. It is very counterintuitive to do what we're proposing to do, given the quality of Old St. Peter's, and I also agree it does appear slightly illogical. However, there is a logic to that position. No matter how illogical that position might be, in that we do want to exclude the rest of the houses around it, because we don't feel it's fair or proportionate to have those within a conservation area and having those restrictions placed upon them as well. Though buildings, like I said, the mid-20th century buildings, they're really fine examples of their type, but it's not a conservation area. And us imposing on them that they have to have planning permission for replacement windows or new roofs or extensions, it's unfair and it's not really justifiable in our view. The difficulty there is there's actually nothing in the legislation that says you can't have a conservation area split into different sections that are sort of, if you like, islands apart from one another. So there is no reason in law why we can't. It's not something we try and do, but if members would want us to look at that and explore that and see if we could do that, I'm very happy to do so. Like I say, there's no reason technically why we can't. It's just something we tend to shy away from, just to kind of try and keep things logical and sort of, quite clearly defined. But I think in this particular case, I don't see a particular problem with it, because it isn't actually adding any additional management issues, because they're all dealt with through the fact that it's a scheduled monument anyway. So any changes to that monument require scheduled monument consent, and they would then be covered anyway. So yes, short answer, councillor, yes, we can look at that, and it's perfectly doable.
Okay, Andrew, I really must commend you for the clarity of your answers. It's very much appreciated. Given what you've said, unless any other member, Chair, I would quite like to bring an amendment, a motion to that effect. I have a second one, which I may again be a sole voice, but I know Councillor Gunn was very interested in this. The second one would be to remove Springbank House from the conservation, but that's two separate things, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. Any other comments from members? Don't have to be in the Thurso or North West Caithness ward. Feel free to make representation. Council Leader.
Similar to how we were discussing this when it was Ward 3, and I respected the views of Ward 2 members at that time, and this time it'll be the same. I will be standing back and respecting the considerations of Ward 2 members on this. I don't think it would be appropriate for Ward 3 members. I've given you the overview of how it was for Ward 3, and that went through with its changes. So on this one, I'll be respecting any outcome from Ward 2 members. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bremner. Okay, on that basis, Matthew, it looks as if you're moving an alternative to what is published in the paper. So if I just remind committee of what that is. And at the moment, we're being invited to note the public comments and agree the council response. And that response is then the recommendation that goes forward to the Economy and Infrastructure Committee, where they will formally adopt or approve and adopt the Thurso Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. So that is effectively approving what is in the current papers, Matthew. So you have a first alternative recommendation, and that is to what? That is to...
I'll be guided by Andrew and Sarah. Effectively is to keep Old St Peter's in the conservation area. As I think, Andrew, the word you used was an island, if you like. And I very much do not like creating extra work for officers, but this, go back to it, it's the jewel in the crown, and it's worth spending some time over it.
Okay, so I would have that down as a recommendation, Matthew, if I was writing it, would be to approve the recommendations as outlined in the report, with the exception of the removal of the E1. What are you calling that, Andrew? Is it a E1 segment, or is there a particular word that you're using?
Is this in regard to St Peter's? Sorry.
Yeah, so it would be removing the E1 section with the exception of the bound, or the St Peter's and St Andrew. Sorry, St
Correct.
Paul's, St Peter's.
Yeah, as you've said it, Councillor. Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And then you've got a second one. First of all, I'll go to my colleague, Councillor Rosie. Councillor Rosie, are you content with that amended recommendation in the first instance?
So, Stuart, I'm just catching up and reading what E1 is again, and can you come back to me?
Yeah, so E1 is the old town in Thurso, so Shore Street, Wilson Lane, effectively everything down from kind of Wilson Street, and that is proposed to be removed from the current conservation area as decided back in the 1970s, I think it was, if I'm right in saying. So it would be the proposal at the moment. The recommendation is to remove that from the current schedule, but Councillor Rees wants to put an alternative, which is to remove it with the exception of Old St Peter's Kirk. So it would not be, we would no longer have a contiguous conservation area. It would be an island or an alcove, or however you want to outline it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm content with that.
Okay. So Matthew, we're happy to accept that one, and then you've got an additional recommendation, which I'm going to call 4 for the purposes of the meeting. Can you outline what that is?
It is simply to remove Springbank House and its garden area from the I've forgotten the phraseology myself. That sector, that chunk.
From the revised conservation area map. So that is, and it currently sits within A2.
It's purely that property. I do acknowledge very much the work Sarah and Andrew have done with the house owner, and it's much appreciated.
Councillor Rosie, have you got any comments on that one? Do you want me to jump in first as chair? Okay.
Yeah, please, just
Slightly-
gather my thoughts here. Yeah, thank you.
I'm slightly loath to remove anything on a one property basis. I think, and the reason I would indicate there's an exception for St Peter's Kirk is because it is a scheduled monument, and I understand what Andrew's talking about the scheduled monument status. I think the point is that we as a local authority are acknowledging the fact that to us it should be within our scheme. To do that on a residential basis or a case-by-case basis, I'm slightly uncomfortable in doing that, because if we're trying to keep a cohesive area that we can outline as being worthy of conservation, with the exception of a brand new development that slipped through the net, and as you can see that there, there are some parts of the conservation area that have been eliminated. E2, E3, E4. So, for example, E3 is what I would call the Dunray.com building. I'm quite content that when that was built, it replaced something that probably should have still been there, and I'm not overly precious about what happens to it. I'm sure a nicer looking building could be there, and it doesn't make sense for that to be included in a scheme. However, given that a number of the responses actually outline the merit of this property being within the conservation area, it would be making an exception when actually there has been support on one side of the ledger and the other. And I think that as members, ultimately it's a member decision, but I will just be honest with you, I'd be uncomfortable removing one property on that basis, given that we're trying to create what should be quite a cohesive. I don't want to be controversial there. I just think it's a pretty big precedent, if that sort of makes sense, Councillor Reid.
These are nearly impossible decisions. I totally understand your point of view.
Andrew, you've got your hand up there.
I was just going to ask if it would be helpful to members if I have a picture of the building. I could put up a picture of the building if that's of any help.
That would be most welcome, Andrew. Have you got sharing privileges on the Microsoft Teams platform that you can do that, or will that need to be granted to you?
It's a very good question. I will give it a go.
You do. That's good.
I do. Excellent. Right. I've got to find the right document. Oh no, it was over there. Apologies. There we are.
Are all members comfortable that you've seen the image?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go back to my ward members then. Carl, I've given you a chance to gather your thoughts as best as you can. Is there any contribution that you want to make? Because I believe Councillor Rees will be looking to move the recommendation or to propose a recommendation that would remove that property from the scheme.
None other than you made very eloquently yourself, Struan. So I would just simply agree with the point you made. I think you absolutely captured everything that had to be said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Matthew, are you looking to move that then? You're currently on mute.
Yes, I am, but it's going to be, it's a very marginal one, but yes, I am looking to move it if I have a seconder. If I don't, that's fine.
Okay, no worries. So I'll then look to, and a reminder, yes, this is specific to Thurso, but all Caithness members have equal weigh in here. Councillor Rees is looking to amend the recommendation, and that is effectively to remove the Springbank House from the A2 additional area that's being added to the revised conservation map. I have that as page 22 of my documentation. Can I look for a seconder? Councillor Mackay, is that a seconder there?
That's a seconder, Chair.
Okay, no worries at all. And then what I will do is I'll then play that off against the current recommendation that's in your paper, with the addition of Old St Peter's Kirk being removed from the E1 segment on that same page. I will move that and I will look for a seconder. Councillor Rosie. Okay. Okay then, folks, this will then go to a vote, and if it's okay, I'll pass on to Anne for a roll call here. Can we make the motion the original recommendation, or the amended original recommendation, and can we make Councillor Rees's proposal the amendment? So motion proposed by myself, seconded by Councillor Rosie. The amendment proposed by Councillor Rees, seconded by Councillor McCann.
Okay, I'll just go through the roll call. So if you could indicate if you wish to vote for the motion, amendment, or abstain. Councillor Bremner.
Abstain, thank you.
Councillor Jarvie.
Motion, thanks.
Councillor Mackay.
Amendment.
Councillor Mackey.
I'll stick with the motion, please.
Councillor McEwen.
Abstain.
Councillor Rees.
Amendment, please.
And Councillor Rosie.
Motion, please.
So that's 3 votes for the motion, 2 for the amendment, and 2 abstentions. So the motion is carried.
Thank you very much, members. I know that was a very, very specific vote at a Caithness committee. I don't think we've ever voted about one individual property before, but I appreciate all of the comments that are made, and I think the big thing for me, again, talking about reviewing this regularly, and also trying to support homeowners in the best way that we possibly can to look after their properties whilst keeping the amenities and the value for the community that they present. Because I'm quite conscious that nobody disagreed with that premise. It was specifically around about the inclusion or not in the actual area itself. Okay then, members, thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Sarah, for your time today. I know it's not the easiest one to potentially go through.
Thank
we're
you.
going to move on to our.
Thank you,
we're going to move on to the agenda item number 11. There are 2 elements to this. This is a slight change to the originally published documentation, and that's because we've now got 2 items in relation to the Wick Common Good. It's now been split up into agenda item 11 and agenda item 12. Is that correct, Mac?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so what we'll do first and foremost is we'll go to agenda item number 11, and that is the Wick Common Good update. And this is a circulated report on behalf of the Eco for Communities in Place, and I believe Mac has been closely involved in this. What we're going to be invited to do here, members, is 2 proposals, and that is to note the position of the Wick Common Good Fund at the end of the first quarter, and 2, to note the update on current Wick Common Good issues. I'm conscious that this is a really, really important issue for Wick members. And I will be lenient with time if members do want to discuss anything to the fullest extent that they can, because I'm conscious it's important for the Royal Borough to get this right. So without further ado, is it yourself, Mac, that's going to be introducing this one? Please feel free to fire away.
It is indeed, Chair. Thanks for that, and good afternoon, members. So I'm going to take you through the main points of it. As the interim chair said, note the position of the common good and note the update. So if we go to item 4.1, income received by the fund in the year to date is as outlined below, which is rental income received £1,684, donations and sponsorship. I might just add in actual fact, I'm working on one screen, so if anyone's trying to get my attention, I apologise, I'll just have to wait till I get to the end. So donations and sponsorship 146. Further rental income is expected to be received in the remainder of the year. 4.2 expenditure. It's common practice across, you've all got the report, but it's common practice across the common good funds administered by the council that where possible those funds meet the expenditure using the income generated from them. The costs related to the properties associated with the Wick Common Good Fund are being compiled, and they were not available at the time of writing this report, and they'll be shared at a future meeting of this committee. Finance are also available and willing to attend a future area business meeting to discuss with members prior to that meeting. I have, so once a complete list of costs associated with the fund's assets is compiled, further discussions will be required to understand how the funds exist and our potential income will be used to offset those costs. Now, in the Appendix 1, although those financial costs are not available, I have tried to list potential liabilities that we're likely to look at for that fund. There is another piece of work that Sarah will come along afterwards, and those would be the issues affecting the Wick Common Good. Sarah Murdoch is waiting patiently to put that forward to you. So it's a very brief report. I appreciate that, members. Councillors, if happy to answer any questions as I can.
Thanks a lot, Mac, and thanks for your efforts in doing this. I know it's taken time to come to fruition, and I know that much like a lot of the common good conversations that have happened across Highland, it's very persistent constituents who've persuaded members to go out and prove that something that everybody knew existed actually existed. So I appreciate that, now we're beginning to get to the point where we're having regular reports, folks. So this is a massive step in the right direction. I've got two members from the East who are wanting to make representations here. So first of all, I want to Council Leader, Councillor Bremner, and then I'll just go straight into Councillor Jarvie, please. Councillor Bremner.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to see that the interim chair has now taken up the consideration from Councillor Mackay and referred to us as the east side of the county and no longer the dark side of the county. Quite right, Councillor Mackay. I acknowledged what you were saying earlier on when I reciprocated the referral, and well saying that you live in Watton, right smack bang between the two of us. So thanks very much for that, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to this. Sarah, how far we've come since we challenged the ownership of a car park in terms of the council's car park enforced charging some time ago, and challenged the council to show that it actually owned the car park. It's a lot of fruitful effort from myself and Ward 3 members at that time, and specifically as well Nicola Sinclair as well, who's moved on to other pastures. And regardless of what happened with the common good or how it got swallowed up into the council, because we've gone through that ad nauseum. We know all about the boroughs and the difference between. Sarah's taught us all about the difference between trusts and assets and land held in trusts, and how it's all kind of morphed over the years. But we are where we are, so I have no intentions in going over all of that ground, because we have covered it ad nauseum in the past 4 or 5 years. But the fact is, we have now recognisably so, and in the public domain and with the local community council, established that there is common good land and that there is common good assets, and therefore there is a common good fund. Sarah and Mac, I've sent you a substantive email there just now, because I think it would be better that you get the opportunity to be able to respond to those comments, because they'll need some answers. But for the public record, what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, Chair, and you did say you were going to be lenient, but I'll try to be as fast as I possibly can with this. I'm going to give an overview. And I know, Sarah, I'd like you to be able to confirm that this is not the kind of standard report that we would be getting. This is just a kick-off to be able to let us see how this will be developed, because in any manner of means it would not be anywhere near substantive enough, but it certainly gets the ball rolling, and it's what members of the public, including the local community council, have been waiting to see. But I'll draw your attention to some of the points that I want to make. 4.1, I'm acknowledging that we actually need a financial report. I'd like to know what format that financial report would take. This is a brief, by any manner of means. It's a brief. So I'd like to see a proper financial report detailing the income, and that's going to be by area, by event, by income type, and how that would be forecasted, so that we can know what it is that we're actually likely to be raising in terms of the common good. What are we doing to sweat the assets? I mean, £1,000 odd is not an awful lot of income for what you see as being the assets of the common good. So, because I mean, I have issues with the signage and the invitation to pay car parks. I don't think they're conducive with the aim of maximising the income for those who wish to contribute to that scheme. You know, I also think that actually about a number of the other areas in the county which have the invitation to pay in place there. 4.2, the cost items being investigated, that's referred to in that item. You know, I would want to be assured that the council will not be seen to be exploiting the common good, and by that I would want to have some assurance to be. I'm sure it wouldn't. Let's put that on record. But I'd want the assurance to be in respect of managing the costs to a minimum, especially considering increased energy costs and in respect of the town hall, which at the moment has been administrated. Well, it's being staffed by Highland. You know, what's the business plan for maximising the benefit of the assets, and who's coordinating that activity? Because maximising the benefit is the #1 focus for the community. Now that we have common good land and common good assets, we should be making them work for the community. Here in this report, it very much seems to be focused on simple insurance of recovery of operating cost. It needs to be more than that. In Appendix 1, the fountain, the donation box, you know, what's the kind of, is there the opportunity for a donation box? You know, something like if they were throwing coins in the fountain, which I'm not sure we would be welcoming, but you know, in terms of opportunities for the people of Wick visitors to be able to contribute to the maintenance. And can I just say, well done to those who've managed to restore that as an iconic feature of the town. It's absolutely fantastic. It's been awaited for such a long time, and it really sets off the work that's been done with the maintenance of the trees when we all walked round and identified the trees that needed to get the canopies opened up to get a bit more light in there. And the whole project on the south bank there is now coming to fruition. So well done to everybody who's been involved in taking that forward. But moving on to the Camps Bay car park, and the regeneration of that area is now subject to discussion and focus in other ways, other bigger ways. That was fully discussed at the Regeneration Summit that was on Friday. The Green Road playing fields, you know, the grass cutting and the grounds maintenance that's there, I'd want to see detailed costings of the finance charges that might be expected. But I'd also, do we have the ability, does the common good have the ability to go out to tender to get best value for the common good? And would this also be a consideration for the operation of other assets on the common good register where appropriate? In the marketplace, if that's now the common good, the status of maintenance in that marketplace since it was regenerated long time ago, folks will remember when it was regenerated into a precinct, has never been at the standard it should have been. And therefore, if it's going to be the common good that's going to be paying for that, what kind of standard of maintenance are we going to be paying for? And what's the cost of that going to be? And the fact that apart from it being, you know, not maybe in keeping with what the standard we would want to have in the marketplace, it is likely to be impacted by the Wick Street Design project, which hopefully that bid will be submitted by 2023, and that will be successful. I'm hoping that will be very successful, and that would be an answer to the marketplace. But if that comes to fruition, then that's a matter that has to be discussed with the common good now, because it's a plan to rip up that entire area and replace it with a 1.7 million current estimated injection of funding. And finally, the Town Hall car park, but this is not an exhaustive list. It's just the basis on which to continue further discussion, which has been going on. And thanks, Sarah, you've been a godsend to the community and the local community council with Roy Mackenzie and the work that he's been doing and they've been doing to be able to, you know, work this common good register forward. But the Town Hall car park, who's currently using it and who has authorised the restrictions of use, and does that need to be reviewed so that, to be able to see what kind of, because we'll be paying for the maintenance of that, but yet it does seem to look as though it's been restricted for use for others. and what's their contribution going to be for that? So a whole load of questions there, Sarah, a whole load of observations, but I've sent them to you by email, and I'd value your responses in due course. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bremner. Councillor Jarvie.
Thank you. I'm more than happy if the officer wants to answer Raymond's questions first before coming to me, because there's quite a few there.
Sure, I don't think it's Mac, you want to take the first stab?
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that those emails, those questions were also just sent at the same time in an email to us, and I think probably require more than just, or deserve more than just a quick response. That's if you're happy with that, Raymond.
I appreciate what Councillor Jarvie is probably requesting there just now, and that is to make sure that the answers that I get would be in the public domain.
Of course.
So if and when I get the answers, I mean, I'd welcome if Sarah wants to just give a broad overview. That's more than I'm more than happy with that. But the substantive, some of it will need substantive answers, and we could maybe look to include that at the responses chair at the next Caithness area committee. And we can, and there are avenues we can get them into the public domain through the local community council as well, Sarah, because you're very much in contact with them. And there is always usually a reporter there as well. So it will get its way into the public domain, and hope that gives Councillor Jarvie some reassurance. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bremner. You've obviously referred to an email there, so can I suggest again, can you fire that over to Anne, just with the headings? We'll then include that there was an email referred to in the meeting that covered said headings, and then when we get the response, I would propose to put it as an addendum to the minute, if that's okay.
And I think if can I just make a quick comment? I've had a quick look through the email, and I think it would merit a well-structured reply. Then it can be circulated and everyone can see it. But just as a sort of general overview, now that we are in a position whereby we have WIC established and there is an element of income coming in and we're aware of what the assets are, we're at the stage very much where we can start to talk strategies, and the members can start to consider strategies and planning specifically for maybe how best to get the best out of the assets that WIC has. I think what we've got to bear in mind is at the time that we managed to establish the asset register, we were very much stymied by what we could do because of COVID and not knowing what was going on and what was likely to happen. And then obviously once life got a bit clearer after that, we were then coming into the next round of elections and so forth. So we're now in the position really whereby we've at least got one of the funds that we've been able to re-establish that actually shows that it has potential for earning income. We've got evidence of that. Okay, it's quite low at the moment, but it's got the potential there and it's showing itself able to earn an income. And now we're in a position where members are in a situation where they can start planning the future and they can look at what the assets are and how best we can, with a modern eye and a very sort of commercial view, look at trying to make WIC earn income for the benefit of the area and also to increase and grow the fund as well. Because that's one thing we're going to have to look at and be careful. And I think there would be merit, as Max said, in perhaps having members of the finance team and things like that to discuss in more detail, even if it was at an area business meeting where you can ask questions and get immediate answers as to how to balance what is using a very newly established fund. Obviously, when we look at the other funds, they've been in position for a lot longer. They have historic funds. They have more money in the coffers. This is a newly established fund where we have to have the time to grow as well as look at meeting our responsibilities as well. And it's going to be a balance. So I think we've got quite a lot of work to do as far as the common good is concerned. But it's one of those things that I think people can be very proactive about being involved in it. But I will certainly look at the email and prepare some responses to that and discuss it with Mac and any other colleagues that I think might be useful to add into the reply.
Super, thank you very much for that, Sarah. We'll go to Councillor Jarvie and Provost McEwen, please.
Thank you, Provost. Just following immediately from that, I think more important than looking at what potential income that we can get out of these assets is more what do we do with that. And just first of all, I would say as exciting as it is to come across it, my sort of honest, personal preference, thinking long term how this could be sustained, would be genuinely to invest as much of that as possible for a period of at least 10 years before even thinking of using it. And that's why, the common good funds we see across the rest of the Highlands have the balance they have. They had a period of growing through investment before taking money out, and some people may not like that because there's no benefit, but you're doing your best to ensure that over the longer term it's something that's more sustainable, and that when you come to using money for whatever it may be, you've actually got something you can do something a bit more significant with. But my first question is on the charges that the council's potentially looking at recharging the new common good fund for. And I'd just like to challenge that somewhat gently, in that the council has had use of the town hall for a number of years effectively for free. And it seems more than cheeky to me to charge a new common good fund for basically giving back something the council's used for free for quite a length of time. I think there has to be some recognition in there that the council has occupied assets, and to charge a full rate is grossly unfair. In terms of car parking, Councillor Bremner's absolutely right in what he said about the signage, and it's the same as what I've noticed in Nairn as well. I can't think of anybody in Caithness who wants to willingly give the council money. So when you go into the council car park, and it's all Highland Council branded, and it's the usual, corporate, nothingness. It's many people just aren't going to pay. But actually, if you had something that was a lot more overt, that said, this is common good land, the money used here will be used, explicitly and only for, bettering WIC and improving the town for the people, something along those lines, I can guarantee you'll get more money than just having the council logo and the, money please. In terms of the income, I think we'll discuss a bit more on that on the next item. But lastly, just in terms of any potential maintenance of parks, spaces, etc., why do we necessarily have to use the council to provide these services just because the council's done it in past? Why are we not doing our best to support the local economy and actually give contracts out to local businesses for these things? And you know what, I bet they probably charge you less than the council would, knowing how the odd way in which it comes up with its recharges. So I think that there's so many opportunities we have within this, more than just claiming back the common good for own. That there's a lot we can do in the sides to provide bettering for the town and county too.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jarvie, and you made a number of really interesting points there. And I think the bit around about strategy, I think, is where the WIC members are going to get their teeth stuck into this, because I think some of the things you've outlined are quite interesting and actually should be viewed as an opportunity. Worth pointing out that the Highland Council, and indeed every Highland ratepayer, helped support the refurbishment of the town hall as well. So I think jumping into a conversation about who owes what to who, does somebody in Nairn, should they be at some sort of recharge? No, I think there's a degree where the constructive ambiguity within the council might actually be beneficial. And I think this might be an area where the less is said on the record, the better. So I'll leave it with that. I'll go to the council leader and then, or sorry, I think it's Provost McEwen and then the council leader then, and Sarah can wrap up any questions at that point in time. Jam?
Thank you for that, Provost. Andrew has raised a lot of interesting points and a lot of very valuable points that I was sort of thinking about as well. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I think our strategy is the way forward for this. But just to help Sarah and Mac out a wee bit about the town hall, Scottish Courts and Tribunals owns a lot of that car park and maintain a lot of that car park. The Highland Council only own the strip down at the wall. So they do, but the Scottish Courts and Tribunals owns the rest of the car park and does maintain it and gets it weeded and everything. Well, it did in my day. So I don't see they'll have given it up. The access is shared access between the town hall, the Scottish courts, and a building firm in Wick. But it might be interesting. I mean, if it's looking a bit sorry at the moment, the building contractor's place. But just to save a wee bit work, Sarah and Mac, that's who Scottish Courts and Tribunals own. I can take you down the bits if you want to know what we own and what the town hall owns, because I have it. I did have it. Okay, that's me.
Oh, thank you very much, Jan. Council leader, is there anything else that you want to add on this item? Because I'm conscious we've got a second element to the common good.
You eloquently said and reminded members on the point that when I went in about this, and Sarah's got a big smile on her face, I made the exact same point as Councillor Jarvie, and then ran for the hills when when they produced the cost of the entire refurbishment, and a fantastic refurbishment of that town hall when it opened a number of years ago. If you want to find out about that refurbishment, just go on to caithness.org and you will see the town hall in all its splendour shut up like a caged bird for that period of time. And also, in the period of time that the town hall was being operated, all the maintenance costs and all the running costs and the staffing costs the council would end up being levied again. We'd be opening up a can of worms. We then decided that we were going to leave it well alone, especially when we found out how much it cost to get it all over and you'll remember that Thurso Town Hall took a similar £10 million investment and then became Caithness Horizons in 2010. But the town hall in Wick was first. But yes, that's what I was meaning by a structured business plan, because we need to understand how best we can sweat the asset, whether it's cash asset or whether it's the asset in terms of how it makes the income. So thanks to Sarah for that. In terms of the town hall, I've mentioned, but in terms of the signage, that's exactly what I was on about in terms of the signage and how we can promote our assets of the common good better. And glad that there's a shared view in terms of how do we actually maintain in terms of contracts for maintenance, whereas at the moment the Highland Council is the custodian, but I would imagine that we have the ability as a common good to be able to look at all the various avenues that are available to us in terms of maintenance of common good assets and running going forward. So thanks for that, and that's the last I've got to say on that. And by the way, just for the ease of reference, Chair, I am fully in agreement with item number 12. I have been absolutely behind that, and and I'll be agreeing to that. So that gets you on quicker there.
Excellent, front-loaded contributions, Council Leader. That's absolutely excellent. I've got Councillor Carl Rosie.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm really brief. It's been interesting to listen to this, but I just wonder how we need to think in Thurso. There may well be different opportunities here. Who knows? I'm looking forward to see what Sarah advises in the future. But looking at Raymond's points, he spoke about financial reporting, sweating the assets, business plans, all the rest of it. Do we need to get things underway in Thurso? I would just, I'm a great fan of not being reactive and let's be proactive. So I don't know whether we need to be included in Cotway in these years, but we certainly need to start thinking about it. Oh, look, rattles some cadence here. I never used the term dark side either. I was really kind up that point. So
I know, Carl.
See, you're always following us. You're always following us.
Yeah. Oh well. Being kind, Carl. This is what it gets you. It's just all this grief. To be fair, I mean, I'm conscious that common good. We're all trustees of it in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, like Inverness Common Good, there's the collective trustees element of it. I actually agree with you, Carl. I think there's a bit of lead and learn here, and I'm more than happy to have regular engagement with our colleagues in Wick because I think it's useful. I also think there's potential synergy because if we're talking about how we best maintain the assets that we have, and if we want to go in a different direction than using Highland Council services or people to do that, it may well be that we don't have a big enough cluster of assets for one part of the county to do that. So it may make sense that the common good funds can work together on that basis. And I think you are absolutely correct in saying that the strategy, business plan, all sorts of stuff. If we're reactive, we're not going to take the advantage of it. And this is potentially one of the areas where I feel if we need any kind of formal support, we might go to some of our funders elsewhere, indeed the NDA, because again, if you're looking at legacy stuff, this could set the county up in a really nice position that works well with legacy projects elsewhere. So I'm more than happy that that's something that we can lead on there. Unless members are otherwise minded, we'll note the two recommendations that are there, and that's the position of the Wick Common Good Fund at the end of the first fiscal quarter and an update on current Wick Common Good issues. I'll then move swiftly on to, sorry, Raymond, you've got your hand up.
Just a very, very quick point, thanks, Chair. This is the kind of thing, maybe we could highlight to new members that it's the kind of thing that we would put on an action planner because it's common to us all, and it allows us to, have that contribution, such as that. To me, that's an excellent example of where councillors would actually work together on points of common, common interest.
Yeah, for the common good, one might say, Raymond. That's the way to look at it.
You said it.
Okay, we'll move then on, members. This is the supplementary agenda item that's come forward. I already have a robust response from the council leader, so I'll not be looking for further input on this one. But this is in relation to the consultation to propose, to dispose by lease of Bignell House to Wick Academy Football Club. Again, the report has been circulated on behalf of the ECO, this time for performance and governance, and the committee will be invited to do the following. Note the outcome of the consultation process, to approve the responses to the representations raised in connection with the proposal as per the Highland Council website, and agree to the proposal to dispose by lease of Bignell House and the address thereof. Is there any additional overview that's going to be required to this paper, members, or are we quite familiar with it? Is it who would be introducing? Is it Mac this time again?
No, I think it's me this
Yourself,
time.
Sarah. Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, I conducted the consultation. It's a full report. It explains the process. It explains what happened. The appendix explains the type of responses that we had, and the representations and the responses that we will be making to those as a council. It's all done in accordance with the statutory provisions in the Community Empowerment Act. I think it's the last item on what's been quite a lengthy agenda, so I'll not do a massive great overview of it. The report is fairly full. I'm happy to take any questions. In the event that members are happy with it going ahead and approve the recommendations, there will need to be a court application for approval as well. This falls within one of the categories of property that are classed as inalienable. So far, this will be the first one that's done out of Wick Sheriff Court, so that'll be interesting for everyone up there in the court there. But we've done a few of them, so we've got a pretty good process in place for getting things through court. And I've kept in touch with the Football Academy and the Community Council, etc., to keep the information flowing as to how we are. Obviously, from their point of view, it feels like it's been taking a long time, but we're entirely tied by timescales. But I'm happy to take any questions. It's the first consultation that's happened in the Caithness area. So yes, this marks another first as far as one of the Common Good Funds is concerned, as far as Wick Common Good Fund is concerned. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Jarvie, you've got your hand up.
Thank you very much, Provost. And I've got a couple of questions. I'll probably come back in once I have some answers to them. The valuation of the property says in the report it was valued at 50,000 originally, but there's a lower value used ex estates because there's a 50-year lease in place. This could be the first property I've come across that the value's gone down with a lease in place. More often than not, the value goes up. And indeed, actually, I've seen a lot of this across the country of companies buying buildings from buying buildings, putting a lease in place and then the value going up because it has a long-term lease in place from a local authority. particularly. One in particular, one building that was purchased for a price of some £800,000. Within the week after securing a lease long-term from the council as homeless accommodation, went from £800,000 in value to 2.3 million. So I'm really struggling to see how a value is decreased with a lease, and with that, for me, that substantially changes how I would view the potential rental income. Now, in my time in the city, I was privileged enough to get a bit more hands-on, and I mean, I've seen and know all of the rental incomes for the properties within that. And what's proposed here is less than the smallest unit in the Victorian market, and it's pretty damn small. I think there's cupboards in council buildings that are bigger than it. And I would just particularly hate being in a position where this is, one of the first sort of decisions we're making as councillors for income, and for it to what feels like to me really sort of be quite far off the mark with what I think's a fair return for the fund and the people of Wick. And I'd really hate for us to be in a position. I mean, I would say, it irritates my mother as well, as a councillor for Nairn, that there's so many leases, 50 to 100-year leases in Nairn for just token, almost comical amounts, where actually the cost of managing that to the common good fund is more than you get back in rent for it. So I'd hate to, set us down a path like that. And I'd eagerly wait the answer, but taking a fairly broad brush, if you're looking at getting return on a property, you'd be looking at a rent to value of between 1 to 15 or 1 to 20, i.e. you would get your money back within 15 to 20 years. And that would, so to be within that bracket, I'd be looking at rental income of between £3,300 and £2,500 per year, based on what's a fairly standard way of assessing return. Because at the moment, what's proposed is a 50-year lease on a building worth £50,000 that we get £1,000 a year for. I'm not aware of any property developer who would accept 50 years to just break even on renting out a property. But I'd appreciate certainly an answer on the valuation part first of all, because I think that's really sort of quite core to how this number has been arrived at.
Councillor Jarvie, is there anything you want to add in there? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, is that I didn't hear that very clearly. Is that me?
Yeah, sorry, yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I queried the valuation specifically with the estates team, and I can understand the position and the view from Councillor Jarvie's position. It's one that I struggle with a bit myself, but it is the view and it's the valuation that's been provided from the estates team. And it's not the first time that I've had a calculation within a query in connection with Common Good Fund. And obviously that's the only property that I deal with. I don't really deal with any of the other properties, so I can only talk from Common Good Fund property position, of where we have a property with a long lease that would have quite a significant value in terms of asset if you were selling it on the open market with vacant possession, but where the value is impacted by the existence of the lease. And I think it's that differentiate that is the big guide here. We're not in a position to sell it on the market with vacant possession, which would be the £50,000 valuation. It's a sale subject to lease, and in the view of the estates team, that reduces the valuation that we could put it on the open market for. Now, I'm also aware that different representatives in the council's team took a slightly different view to that in considering properties in Inverness, where a property had been bought for investment purposes for Inverness Common Good and is now fully leased, and therefore was a more marketable proposition than when it wasn't fully leased. But I went back a couple of times to the surveyor in this particular case and received the same response on every time. and it's for that reason that the information is contained in the report and is contained in the way that it is in the report, because quite simply they're the experts as far as the council is concerned, the team that we have, and that's what I was advised. On the question of the rent, that was specifically raised as an inquiry for value of the rent, because it is seen to be very low. Bignord House is quite an unusual property in the sense that it's a non-traditional build of property, and fairly early on, when discussions were taking place around what would happen to Bignord House and whether or not the proposal for leasing it to the football club was a good proposal, did we have to consider it as accommodation first? What became very clear was, because of the nature of the property, with it being a non-traditional build, etc., it's not the sort of property that would be considered by the council as appropriate to fall within their remit for housing, and that really for use and moving forward, there's a lot of work that the Football Academy are willing to take on and do to bring the property up to scratch. It's, again, we went back specifically because comments were made, as can be seen on the responses to the representations, that it seems to be low when compared to other buildings. How is it calculated? And there's an explanation right in the very first one that obviously they took into account location, size and condition. It's non-standard construction. It's very poorly insulated. It wasn't considered fit for purpose as a dwelling. The tenants are taking on a building in that condition and are going to make it as efficient as possible with all the improvements that they're going to do to it. So that has been very much reflected in the agreement in respect of the rental figure that's been arrived at. And obviously whatever improvements, etc., they do ultimately will be to benefit the Common Good Fund, because in due course, I mean, that property remains as an asset. Should that lease come to an end, then the Common Good Fund would have the benefit of an improved building. Should it continue, then you've obviously got the situation whereby you have rent review clauses, or you have the ability to negotiate a new lease. So they are taking on a lot of the running costs, which at the very least could be quite expensive. And at the moment, most, if they try to do all they can to improve the efficiency, insulation, etc., is going to take a fair amount of investment in the property from the point of view of the Football Academy. And I think that's why we've got those two figures there. The position on as I say, on the valuation, it's a difficult one for me to do anything other than to report the information I was provided by the estates team without a representative of the estates team here to explain it. But I did go back to them a couple of times and came back with the same results. And that's the only information I have, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much for those responses. Councillor Bremner, you come back in.
Yeah, for those of us who know the history of this property, Sarah's bang on the money there just now. You would, and some of those points, Sarah, had been previously raised in terms of the value of the property, but considering those of us who are aware of the tenancy problems that we had with that property, and that tenant had to be rehoused because the property was substandard. There's just no way that it would ever be let out. And then following that, when we found out that the property was actually part of the common good, because the tenant in there was actually paying to the HRA. So there is a history of that property, and that property is very much substandard. The condition of the property is not good. And then I tend to take a holistic view in this as well, because it has its connections with the whole squash courts area and the Bignord area, and the connection it's had with the history of the whole sporting area around there, and with Wick Academy. And they've been looking to progress this quite quickly, and you know that, Sarah, with the representation that we've had, and trying to progress this as fast as possible. But they have had to wait until this process comes to the Caithness Area Committee. Then it will have to be referred to the Sheriff. But and the fact that in 4.1 it says that there will be a review of the rent, but I mean, we would need to be considerate of just exactly what the holistic benefit to the whole community would be in terms of this popular football club, popular popular group of people, very enthusiastic in trying to develop the asset and the amenity of that whole area. But they know that this rent review will take place every 5 years. So in the 50 years, it will be reviewed 9 times. But they have made commitment to substantial investment in the property. And even then, there's no guarantee that it would land up being something that would end up having to be, the sale would be subject to lease, as you were mentioning there, Sarah. So there would be lots of different considerations at the end of that kind of period of time as to what that value would be. So I'm quite satisfied that it's gone through the process that we've needed it to go through to get to this position, and we need to take a more holistic view as well as the factual view in terms of the figures that's been put in front of us. The history of that property is not a good one, and I have to say the tenant has now been rehoused elsewhere. And good luck to Wick Academy with their venture with this. I think it'll be a real benefit and a real asset to the community, and they will be very supportive of this.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Mac, have you got a non-digital hand up? I'll go to yourself.
Yeah,
it's not big and yellow, so it's not as noticeable.
I don't know why my button's not working. I apologise, Chair. So I think there's a balance to be struck between financial gain to the common good and benefit to the community. I'm not sure whether that came into play when the assessors were looking at it. Maybe they're a bit more cold-hearted than that. But I know we have a duty to maximise financial return into the common good. But I think from my point of view, it's a cracking organisation that's going to make good a building that is, was on the road to dereliction, isn't it? So that would be my thought process on that. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Mike. Councillor Jarvie, do you want to come back to a number of those points, and then I'll be looking to get the recommendations moved, please.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, in terms of a couple of things that we mentioned, in that this is a full repair, maintain, and insure lease. That's not anything we should view as special or a reason to offer it for less. Repair, maintain, and insure is the standard terms for a commercial lease, and if you wanted a fully insured and repaired commercial lease, any landlord would have to provide that to you for quite some considerable sum. So we shouldn't be walking back from what I think is the market rate because we're offering that when those terms already are the market rate. To offer beyond that, you would want quite substantial insurance yourself as the landlord. In terms of the rent reviews, I'm glad that they're in there, unlike some other common good fund leases across the country. Having seen these happen in the Inverness Common Good Fund, I have to say very often I was left wanting for them by how some of the valuations came through from the estates team. And if we're to take the reduce it as far back as it is, it's a building that not many people want. It's on a plot of ground, but there's someone who can make use of it. £1,000 a year would be a fair sum for a ground rent on its own, let alone a building. And whilst yes, they are going to be making improvements that are more than welcome, those are improvements specifically that will assist in their cash flow. It will make the building less costly to run. And taking a long-term view, because this is a 50-year lease, those investments that they make will more than pay itself off over the term of the building and that lease. So, there's only so much you can factor that in. I can understand and appreciate how estates have valued it in such that we can't technically sell it even if we wanted to, so it's there for a reduced rate. But to my mind, that just really doesn't quite cut it for the reality of getting what is a fair return. I very much doubt there's anywhere else in the town that you could rent a building for that near comical amount of money. It's just not hitting the mark for me. I'm afraid. I have no qualms whatsoever with who's going in there. It's a great use. It'll provide great benefit and is more than appropriate. But when we're setting in stone here the annual rate, and we can only make percentage adjustments over that rate at the review, we can't decide to hike it up to £3,000 after 5 years if we want to. What we do here and now is very important. And just looking at the sort of specific ratios I mentioned before of how to assess a return on a building by evaluation, and what Community Council came back with, I would be more than happy to move a motion, or rather amendment, if so, that the consultation is reissued with for a lease of £3,000 per year, because I think that's a much fairer amount that reflects both a fair rent to the club. It's not a hugely taxing amount, but also something that ensures there is a fair and reasonable return to the common good fund as well. I would seek a seconder for that.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvie. Are you looking to, I'm presuming, Raymond, with your hand being up, you're not seconding that proposal. So I don't know, are you looking to move the original recommendation?
I'm going to move the original motion, and I look for a seconder.
Okay. Anybody wishing to second that, ideally from the borough?
I'll second that.
Okay, so that's the motion as moved from Councillor Bremner, Councillor Leader and Provost McEwen. And Councillor Jarvie, have you got a seconder?
Yeah, I'm not sure, so I'll advertise myself to any willing takers.
I'm not seeing a seconder at this point in time, Councillor Jarvie, so do you want to, obviously that will then pass.
If I could record my dissent on
Yeah, I was just about to ask if you wanted to record your dissent, so your dissent is noted. Thank you very much, members. That is the end of our session today, I think. Is it, Mac, or is there more stuff to be added? Sorry, you're on mute, Mac.
I know. So if only it was that easy in real life. 2 seconds. In the agenda, item 13, the committee that is asked to note the following ward discretionary budget applications that have been approved. This is a new item that will appear on every committee, and it just gives it's just a note what ward discretionary we've put out. So we've only had one so far, and it was shared between wards 2 and 3, and it was a new flagpole for Wick at a cost of around about £1,500. Still haven't had those full costs back yet. It's not been drawn, but that's where we are so far.
Super. Everybody content with that? Is there any proposals, any objections to that agenda item 13? Nope, I'm not seeing anything, folks. Well, I believe that is now everything. Am I correct? Sorry, the supplementary agenda slightly threw me there. Apologies. Okay, well, thank you very much, members. I make that 10 minutes to 2. I really do thank you for your patience and what has been very constructive debate and discussion over the course of most this morning and early this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. It's been fine, but I hope Ron's back in the chair as soon as he possibly can. And I thank you all for your attendance and your contributions. Thank you very much, folks. Bye-bye.